During a grotesque classroom broadcast, several students pin down a white-haired girl as she fights to break free. The bullies seize her legs, laugh at her resistance, and turn the abuse into a public spectacle, while their classmates swarm around top student Zhang, recording her desperate pleas instead of offering help. Blue-haired gang leader Wang Wei decides his twisted game needs one more unwilling participant, so his followers drag in camp volunteer Wu Qi, who is bruised, stripped, and barely able to stand. They slam him face first onto the floor and order him to crawl toward Zhang, and the battered, trembling volunteer hears the command while his tormentors tower over him, while Zhang recoils in horror and begs the helpless man to stay away from her. Wu Qi's shaking hand makes it painfully clear that Wang Wei is forcing him to obey, so his hesitation earns another savage kick that sends him crashing across the room. Wu Qi cries out from the impact, but fear alone cannot bring the nightmare to an end. Even as one accomplice worries they have crossed the line and Wang treats a possible death as meaningless, Wu Qi turns toward Jiang and apologizes because he is too weak to protect her, before another blow leaves him hemorrhaging on the floor as his body finally gives out. Jiang screams for help while Wang restrains her and delights in the panic around him, yet her cries continue as Wu Qi quietly draws his final breath, and death should have ended his story, until a killing intent system suddenly binds itself to him. While Wang resumes tormenting Zhang, the newly activated system prepares to intervene, and she demands an explanation, unaware that something impossible has just happened nearby. Among the silent crowd, a bespectacled student is forced to confront his supposed devotion to justice. An unseen voice dares the self-proclaimed heroes to take Zhang's place if they truly care. Wang tightens his hold on her and threatens even greater pain if she resists, until his confidence falters when the man his gang just killed begins to move again. Wu Qi rises in a white coat and calmly ignores the order to retrieve Wang's phone. Inside his reborn mind, the system issues its first objective: eliminate the school's instigator of violence within 72 hours, because the masked guide recognizes its new host as the deadliest assassin from his former life. Back in the laboratory, the stunned students watch Wu Qi move toward the chemical supplies, and he begins mixing substances before announcing that everyone in the room will be dead within 30 minutes. As the masked guide realizes he is constructing a mercury-based explosive and watches with perverse excitement, but their contract forbids him from killing anyone except the assigned target on pain of permanent death. Calling himself a law-abiding citizen, Wu Qi conveniently drops the volatile flask just as Wang lunges at him. The container shatters against the floor and detonates, blasting through the laboratory and throwing everyone aside, while Wu Qi jokes that accidents are impossible to predict and a badly wounded attacker screams nearby. Even the system is stunned by the shameless loophole he found in its supposedly absolute restriction, then decides that this calculating, newly reborn killer may be the perfect host after all, though it still warns that collateral injuries will reduce his score and weaken any future resurrection. Wu Qi rejects the students' claims of innocence and treats silent witnesses as accomplices to the active bullies. The system insists that only the designated target is guilty, but he openly questions that convenient definition, before the enraged Wang orders every follower still standing to kill their resurrected victim. Wu Qi answers by tearing through the attackers with terrifying accuracy and speed. Moments later, he remains completely untouched while the charging bullies writhe and scream around him. Wu Qi appreciates the irony that the tormentors stockpiled the very materials now being used against them, then examines the defeated group and concludes that the true instigator is probably somewhere else. Determined to limit unnecessary deaths and expose the hidden objective, Wu Qi studies Jiang more closely. The moment their eyes meet, her startled face awakens a disturbing memory from his previous life, because he never imagined encountering that familiar face again, much less in this new world. Wu Qi covers Jiang's mouth before she can question his transformation and cryptically thanks her, then claims that her existence is the reason he appeared in this place at all. 2 days earlier, Wu Qi stood at the top of Dragon Country's underworld as its greatest assassin, able to remove any target within minutes and make every murder resemble an ordinary accident. His peerless ability made him feel untouchable, so he lowered his guard around a mysterious white-haired woman, yet their peaceful romantic moment became the exact instant his supposedly invincible life was taken from him. The killer left no trace, but a masked system appeared with an offer of rebirth and revenge, hovering over his corpse and promising him a chance to hunt down the mastermind behind his flawless murder. Back in the laboratory, the memory strengthens Wu Qi's resolve to solve both mysteries surrounding him, while the system rewards his perception by granting him an unexplained title earlier than expected. Wu Qi walks past the shaken Zhang without answering her, forcing the reluctant guide to follow, as he opens a status display showing an E+ rating, the apprentice title, a wish for revenge, and a shrinking mission timer, until a glowing targeting interface transforms his initial disappointment into interest, revealing learnable traits in broken objects and nearby students, including blindness, fragmentation, and forced kneeling. The system explains that these strange copied abilities become useful only through practice and growing proficiency. Before Wu Qi can test the theory, the camp director storms into the laboratory and demands an explanation for the blast, while the terrified bullies accuse him of attempted murder, and his comprehension of a nearby table quietly reaches 20%. He realizes that the apprentice title grows by uncovering the hidden nature and history of ordinary objects, potentially evolving into observation mastery, an investigative ability perfectly suited to finding his target. A scan of the director exposes secret voyeurism mannerism behind his respectable image, along with a professional photography skill Wu Qi can learn. Armed with that compromising information, he embraces the furious official and agrees that someone must take responsibility, then whispers that the director's hidden collection of photographs would make an excellent culprit, leaving Liu Jiuan terrified enough to accept the explosion as an unfortunate accident. The injured Wang Wei protests and demands that the director arrest their supposedly murderous teacher, but Zhang steps forward to defend teacher Wu and takes the blame for the entire disaster herself, only for Liu to touch her inappropriately and expose the depravity beneath his respectable facade. Zhang jerks away with a frightened cry, making the director's true nature obvious to everyone present, as a determined blonde student pushes through the crowd and urgently calls her Ping Ping. Her best friend carefully checks Zhang for wounds and is relieved to find her still standing, and Zhang reassures the girl while Wu Qi quietly notices yet another unusually courageous student. Wang turns his fury on director Liu, shouting the official's full name and ordering him to obey, while Liu calculates that defying Wang's influential father could expose the construction money he embezzled, and the blonde student reveals that teacher Wu intervened only after catching the bullies harassing classmates. Wang refuses to surrender and confidently claims that every other student will support his version of events. When questioned, several frightened witnesses side with Wang and falsely accuse both Zhang and their teacher. Security officers enter the ruined laboratory, and Liu mistakes the coordinated lies for an easy escape, so he publicly brands Zhang and teacher Wu as shameless criminals while pointing directly at the crying girl. Zhang denies the accusation through her tears, but Yu Lian immediately declares that she trusts her friend completely. Teacher Wu drapes his coat around Zhang and gently tells her to save her tears for someone who deserves them, not waste them on trash whose lies are already collapsing. Convinced that his family's influence will protect him, Wang challenges the unarmed instructor to fight until Wu Qi reveals the missing phone, which still contains a recording of the entire assault. Wang realizes that his former victim stole the device, and Wu mocks him for preserving such perfect evidence, then warns every liar in the room that karma has a habit of arriving disguised as an accident. Wu Qi places a hand on Director Liu's shoulder and quietly asks whether the official truly stands behind his accusation, unleashing a suffocating wave of murderous intent that makes a spectral nightmare seem to rise behind him. Liu becomes certain that disobedience will end with his immediate death, so he abruptly turns and strikes Wang Wei in front of the entire room, then orders security to detain the bully and summon Wang's parents for disciplinary action. Wang screams about his father's donations, but the guards drag him down the corridor anyway. After dismissing everyone else, the nervous director asks whether teacher Wu considers the punishment sufficient, only to learn that Wu has already sent evidence of his misconduct and secret photographs to the Education Bureau, where officials will soon provide extremely personal feedback on the director's remarkable contribution. As Liu begs for mercy, Zhang realizes that her teacher now feels like a completely different person. Once the immediate danger passes, Yu Lian offers to escort the shaken Zhang back to the dormitory. Behind them, Wang watches the instructor leave and silently vows that his new enemy will never know peace, while a bespectacled student steps out of the quiet crowd with a strangely knowing smile. Security drags Wang along the corridor, unaware that the silent observer is following close behind, and the wounded bully clings to a single thought. Teacher Wu will be finished when his revenge begins. Outside, sunset settles over the campus as another concealed threat quietly moves into position, while the resurrected assassin crosses the courtyard with 71 hours left to complete his first mission, when a crimson warning reports that a dangerous transformation called cutification has reached 80%. The masked guide explains that Wu Qi's arrival triggered the process and again praises its extraordinary host. Anyone overwhelmed by genuine killing intent becomes a cud monster in this world, and this transformation is nearly complete. The system wonders how long its legendary assassin can survive, while Wu Qi welcomes the approaching challenge, despite a warning that an ordinary human cannot easily defeat one of these transformed killers alone. Elsewhere on campus, a shadowy figure completes its change and locks onto Wu Qi from another building, its glowing eyes carrying only one murderous command: Wu Qi must die, while something in that gaze reaches him from the courtyard and draws his eyes back to the high window, quietly confirming that someone dangerous is watching from above without showing the slightest concern. Instead of pursuing the watcher, Wu Qi returns to his room to finish preparing. Night has fallen by the time he settles inside, with several system avatars hovering nearby, and despite the guide's warning about unfamiliar powers, he begins testing his new perception, flooding the dormitory with targeting panels that map every object within his expanding field of awareness. At first, the learning ability reaches only 3 meters and cannot exceed the knowledge stored inside its host. Yet by combining familiar fragments, it can reconstruct facts Wu Qi never consciously understood, generating information beyond ordinary memory as the interface surges with energy. Its first absurd result is Bird Dropping Z's acceleration, born from an impossibly rare event outside the window. The discovery overloads Wu Qi's mind and reveals that he can sustain the ability for only 5 seconds. But rather than surrender, he decides that future experiments should happen far away from witnesses. All he needs is a completely safe subject capable of surviving whatever the power releases. Before his reflection offers the clearest possible vessel, and the timer falls to 54 hours. Because nobody suits a lethal test better than a man who already holds authority over his own death. Wu Qi activates the Crimson Eye and directs its full analytical force at himself. His consciousness enters a vast mental space where a sealed record warns that physical death unlocks deeper memories, even though he assumed every memory had already merged with his own during resurrection, prompting him to place a hand on the preserved corpse and descend into its sealed memories, witnessing the volunteer's entire past from a clear, almost godlike perspective. The system explains that unconscious perception captures far more than active memory can process, prompting Wu Qi to search those buried details for whoever manipulated the gentle volunteer. The memories reveal a young man whose painful childhood inspired a sincere desire to become a teacher, all because a single caring teacher stayed beside him and showed that a troubled child could still be protected. That ideal eventually brought him to summer camp, where he discovered several boys beating a terrified girl, and immediately seized an attacker's belt while demanding an end to the abuse. When Wang Wei swung again, the former Wu Qi caught the blow and confronted the strangers, only to be answered by fists from every side and a warning from Wang to stay out of their affairs. Yet the battered volunteer continued rising because ignoring such cruelty felt morally unforgivable, and despite his bruises and humiliation, he refused to withdraw the accusation. Before Director Liu, he argued that students who tormented their classmates could not go unpunished, but the official silenced him and ordered the frightened Xiao Kei to explain what happened. Teaching assistant Wu gently promised to support her and offered one chance to reveal the truth, only for terror to close her throat as tears overwhelmed every attempt to speak. Liu Jiwan used that silence to dismiss the case and warn the volunteer against further involvement, and warned that another incident would end his chance of ever entering the teaching profession. After the meeting, the class clustered in the corridor and left the rescued girl trembling by herself. Teacher Wu escorted her back through the watching crowd, still unwilling to abandon his responsibility, with Zhang Ping'er arriving ahead of everyone else to make sure Xiao Kei had not been hurt. Xiao Kei apologized to the teaching assistant, her guilt replacing the courage that fear had stolen, but the following days punished his intervention with relentless humiliation, sabotage, and increasingly vicious attacks. Even after seeing Xiaoke dragged along the stairs, he considered enduring everything until the camp ended, then rejected that cowardly impulse and rushed back in, knocking one tormentor away with his books, bringing Liu Jiwan's anger down on the volunteer again as Wang enjoyed the result from nearby. Bruised and facing dismissal, he nevertheless believed Xiaoke's safety justified standing against them. At last, she named Wang Wei and his lackeys, and confirmed that Teacher Wu had intervened to protect her. Pressed once more, Xiaoke repeated the accusation before Liu Jiyuan, and finally overcame her fearful silence. Outside the office, she rewarded her bruised defender with a grateful smile that left him speechless, and he realized that protecting one child had given all his suffering a meaningful purpose, only for that fragile triumph to shatter when Xiao Kei fell from the school roof during a violent storm, and her scream pulled a horrified crowd toward the widening stain at the building's base. Grief hardened into rage as Wang taunted the volunteer and threatened to make him the next victim, while the original Wu blamed his own interference for escalating the abuse until Xiao Kei died, then confronted the smiling bully and declared that his personal weakness had allowed the tragedy. He attacked with everything he had left and begged the watching students to intervene. Yet the gang pinned him hard to the ground and ignored his cries for anyone to intervene, asking the silent crowd to defend the next helpless child before another life was lost. The archive releases Wu into the present with 4611 remaining, and the system awaiting his judgment. He calls his predecessor childish and foolish, refusing to identify with the man's sentimental ideals, and brands that weak volunteer a waste of space despite wearing exactly the same face. Even so, the assassin admits that he does not dislike the stubborn man who refused to surrender, deciding that a dying person's final wish deserves enough respect to be fulfilled. With the timer already below 46 hours, Wu Qi leaves before naming either his prey or his plan, though the quiet confidence in his laugh shows that the dead man's memories gave him what he needed. On another part of campus, several boys close around a heavy-set student and jeer at their captive, and the bruised victim begs an older boy for help because he cannot withstand another beating. A purple-haired bully pummels the chubby student and mocks his body while demanding that he stop feigning unconsciousness. He even promises a promotion within Wang's organization if the victim continues serving as a practice dummy, until Wu Qi silently appears behind them and turns the attacker's confidence into freezing dread. One bully swings in panic despite his partner sensing that Wu Qi is no longer the same person, and a casual counter buries itself in his face before the warning is complete, hurling him backward through concrete pipes and scattering the gang's stunned spectators. Wu Qi calmly asks whether tasting real strength has finally revealed how pathetic those fists truly are. In a different classroom, older students run a violent fight ring where drunken onlookers bet on unwilling contestants. A muscular fighter obeys and floors his opponent as the lounging enforcers celebrate, until a red-haired bettor, furious over his losses, breaks a bottle against the defeated boy and kicks the fallen victim back toward consciousness for yet another fixed bout. The terrified victim apologizes helplessly and wonders why monsters prosper while innocent students are punished, But his unanswered plea echoes through the room until the doors finally open. Wu Qi fills the doorway like an executioner and announces that he has found the gathering at last. But the red-haired ringleader treats the brutality as harmless recreation and invites him to join. Wu Qi looks from the battered contestants to the captives and intoxicated crowd, questioning what part of this is harmless, then asks why the muscular victor uses his genuine martial skill against victims instead of his oppressors. The victim wants only to avoid further punishment and says one student cannot oppose the whole gang, but Wu Qi exposes the real answer. Hurting weaker victims is easier than facing the fear controlling him. Called cowardly, he argues that Wang Wei's people control the campus so completely that even teachers cannot touch them. A blonde enforcer interrupts the accusation and demands that everyone stop insulting their rulers. He waves a cigarette at the newcomer and confidently orders him out of the room. But Wu Qi catches his wrist mid-gesture and instantly strips away that casual arrogance, crushing the bully's hand while telling him to solve his own problems without depending on others, then wrenching his knee and arm together to demonstrate the painful cost of that dependence. Wu Qi ends the punishment by stuffing the lit cigarette between his lips and delivering a lesson about its dangers. The red-haired organizer responds with a bottle and screams that the teacher has chosen death, while the assassin simply rolls up his sleeves and appreciates the advantages of a younger body. The room dissolves into a blur of blood and bodies moving too quickly for the survivors to follow, leaving every enforcer unconscious as Wu Qi calmly dusts off his hands before the muscular student. He declares that his part is finished and presses the frightened fighter to choose a response, while the system urges him back toward the real mission and calls this beating sufficient revenge. But Wu Qi dismisses that motive because revenge has nothing to do with his unfinished objective, because the pain is only a tool for restoring the courage the victims have forgotten. The startled system begins wondering whether its ruthless killer is somehow changing. In the courtyard, 3 more tormentors haul away a student in glasses despite his pleas to let go, and their smug leader calls the suffering bad luck before ordering him to avoid them forever, until Wu Qi appears behind the bully and compares Wang's followers to cockroaches infesting the school. The leader recognizes yesterday's classroom volunteer and angrily demands to know why he followed them, then tears up a folding chair and swings the heavy frame at Wu Qi's head. Wu Qi ducks beneath its arc and sends the useless seat spinning across the courtyard, then ends the leader's rush with a savage kick planted squarely in his face, sending the aggressor crashing onto the stones far from his improvised weapon. Wu Qi turns the descending chair aside and collapses its frame under the trapped bully. With their strongest companion down, the other two hesitate as the teacher turns toward them. But the pair quickly regain their arrogance and mock the idea that a single defeat could scare them. When ominous rustling from the bushes announces the arrival of their hidden reinforcements, 3 armed enforcers lead a surrounding mob and declare that Wu Qi invaded their territory, while nervous students recognize Wang Wei's people and fear becoming the gang's next victims. The entire mob charges at once, mocking Wu Qi's heroism and claiming that powerless trash can never change, but the students he challenged step forward behind him and prove that his harsh lessons have taken root. Wu Qi's answer is a rising kick that throws the first weapon-wielding boy onto his back, then tears through the formation and knocks several enforcers aside before their weapons can connect, finishing by crushing the muscular leader's defense with a perfectly placed kick to the face. One bat-wielding thug rushes Wu Qi's blind side and hopes raw force can reverse their collapse, until the victim who once obeyed in fear steps between them and finally strikes back with conviction, leaving the assailant unconscious while the frightened student struggles to recover his breath. Wu Qi wants to know whether that first act of resistance has finally broken the hold of his old terror. The student honestly admits that the terror remains and hides part of his face behind a trembling hand, yet embraces teacher Wu's belief that the first transformation must happen within oneself. Wang's other followers ridicule the muscular student's courage and threaten everyone who stands beside Wu Qi. One of them points a metal pipe at the rebels, certain that their brief resolve will crumble, but the bespectacled victim takes up another weapon and vows to fight alongside them, inspiring more silent witnesses to exchange glances and finally step beyond their fear. Within moments, a wide circle of students forms around Wu Qi and traps the stunned gang, whose leader desperately insists that superior numbers still guarantee their victory. Instead, the clash ends with armed bullies scattered across the ground as Wu Qi declares that the wind has changed. The system complains that his campus drama consumed precious time, leaving only 40-21-23 before failure, while astonished students spread word that Wang Wei's once-feared faction has finally fallen, and Wu Qi marches the defeated enforcers across campus with an ever-growing procession behind him. Wang intercepts the group, his battered face twisting when he sees the teacher approaching, and furiously demands to know why so many of his followers are being paraded around. But Wu Qi simply claims that the students were fighting and need proper education at the office. Wang silently promises to punish everyone supporting the teacher once once this humiliation ends, only for the muscular fighter and bespectacled student to challenge him openly and declare their fear finished. Their united defiance forces Wang to retreat in disbelief while the surrounding students close ranks, and dark growths begin spreading across his arm as something monstrous changes beneath the skin. Murderous rage overwhelms him until Wu Qi's name escapes through clenched teeth. Rumors race through classrooms and playing fields that Wang Wei's entire organization has been broken, while former lackeys watch Wu Qi's procession and realize their terrifying reputation no longer exists. Wang later corners the bespectacled student, Yi Xiaofan, and demands the contraband he was ordered to obtain. And when the terrified student begs for an extension, Wang answers with a knee to the abdomen, warning that teacher Wu cannot protect either Yi or the parents employed by Wang's father, then throws him back to the ground and insists that their hidden deal be honored at once, until Yi promises a quick delivery and begs him to leave his family untouched. The red-haired organizer grows tired of waiting and proposes attacking Wu Qi immediately, but Wang silences the hot-headed suggestion with a raised hand and an icy stare, ordering everyone to avoid the teacher's growing band of supporters until his preparations are finished. First, he intends to weaken Wu Qi with several smaller gifts before delivering the decisive blow. Unaware of the plot, Wu Qi walks through a hallway filled with grateful students praising his strength, while the system reveals that only 82123 remain and warns that playing hero may cost him the mission. Cutification has already reached 98%. Meaning the monster will emerge within 2 hours and hunt him down, so Wu Qi finally agrees to move and stops outside third-year class 2, sliding the door open with one hand as he quietly searches the room until his attention settles on Jiang Pinger among the waiting students. He approaches her desk, holds out a hand, and asks whether they can talk in private, but before Jiang can respond, Yulian grabs her shoulders and eagerly accepts on her behalf, leaving the white-haired girl deeply flushed as she stammers her reluctant agreement. The system accuses Wu Qi of flirting, but he identifies Jiang as the mission's greatest variable, then asks when Wang's harassment became so vicious, learning that his earlier pranks never approached this cruelty. Beneath the setting sun, Wu Qi continues studying Jiang's face until she notices his stare, and the flustered girl touches her cheek before asking whether something unusual is showing, only for him to say that everything looks normal and casually call her beautiful. Moving closer, Wu Qi asks whether Jiang somehow knew him before this life. The question awakens a gala memory in which an elegant white-haired woman recognized him after eliminating her own target and confirming his reputation as the world's highest-ranked assassin, though she immediately mocked that title and threatened mutual destruction if he obstructed her mission. Wu Qi caught her sudden strike with amused precision, pleased that their first meeting established clear boundaries. The woman relaxed enough to offer her hand and reveal the friendliness rumored beneath her brutality, while he argued that only an equal could earn her friendship, making him uniquely qualified. Back in the present, Wu Qi's sharp hearing catches engines, drawn weapons, and hidden shooters closing in. He instantly pulls Yang into his arms and shields her as she flushes at the unexpected embrace, then quietly asks whether Pinger still has something important to tell him. Their movement echoes another ballroom memory where the two assassins danced as enemies surrounded them. Neither broke the elegant rhythm or revealed the readiness concealed beneath their formal grace, even while whispering precise enemy positions at 4, 6, and 7 o'clock, before both drew hidden pistols and fired outward as the dance accelerated, spinning together through the attackers without ever releasing each other's hands, while every bullet found its mark and each partner reloaded within the deadly choreography. Their waltz ended only after fallen gunmen, blood, and shattered marble covered the hall. The memory closes on a silent look shared after their effortless victory, returning Wu Qi to the embarrassed Jiang as he gently lifts her chin for comparison, and concludes that she is not the same woman just as a motorcycle hurtles toward them. Wu gathers Jiang against his chest and springs away an instant before the machine reaches them, landing safely while the riderless motorcycle races past and curves around for another charge. As the system belatedly recommends dodging, and a separate projectile sparks against the courtyard stones, a towering blue barrier suddenly rises across the motorcycle's path and swallows the approaching danger, sending the machine violently into the luminous wall while Wu Qi keeps Jiang behind him. The weaponized motorcycle continues accelerating through the chaos for one final attempt, convincing the terrified system to begin searching for a replacement host. But Wu Qi merely laughs with one arm around Jiang and his free hand ready to counter. Red lines map every component and trajectory as he ridicules the guide's attempted desertion, then gather into a luminous knot above his fingertip when the calculation is complete, exposing the first power of Apprentice as his attention locks onto the motorcycle's weakest components. Endless knowledge activates and detonates the vehicle in a spectacular blast before it reaches them. Flames consume the wreck while nearby students mistake the explosion for a blackout or unexplained noise. But Zhang remembers Wu Qi moving one finger immediately before the motorcycle blew apart, and demands his true identity as he casually suggests examining what remains, only for Wu Qi to smile and introduce himself as an ordinary passerby. and students lean from open windows to discover what caused the explosion below. Wuchi retreats with Zhang in his arms, while voices summon help around the flaming wreck and severed cable. While elsewhere, the coerced Ye Xiaofan slips into the chemistry laboratory and steals mercuric oxide. Later, Zhang reasons that the volunteer is dead and someone unfamiliar is now using his body to oppose the abuse, and Wuchi confirms her entire theory, surprising a system that never forbade such honesty. Before Zhang accepts the impossible explanation and asks permission to help with the unfinished mission, reasoning that his complete transformation and her own lack of value give him no reason to lie, especially when deception would be far easier than inventing such an unbelievable story. She offers him complete trust and immediate assistance in exchange for one later request, before coloring under his gaze and quietly entrusting herself to his protection. Wu Qi responds by awakening his second apprentice ability, the Blazing Mind's Arc. Golden power draws Jiang's mind from the body and carries Wu into the landscape of her psyche, separating her awareness from the physical surroundings so suddenly that she cannot react. While the system wonders whether its host truly entered another person's mind on his first attempt, astonished that he reached the deepest mental layers with almost no resistance. Describing a human mind suspended between spiritual superego, material instinct, and the self that holds them together, and an intruder normally needs recognition born from powerful affection or death, before breaking the superego's restraints of law, emotion, prejudice, and morality, then resisting the Ide's primitive desires to gain freedom within the mind, making Zhang's effortless acceptance extraordinary enough to resemble natural enlightenment. Inside that inner world, Zhang stands with a wooden club before two frightened girls and challenges their approaching bullies. Her memory shows her swinging the club while the system praises the integrity guiding every strike. Afterward, Zhang comforts the rescued girls, introduces herself, and gently asks their names, and the moment of protection blossomed into close companionship among Zhang, Yulian, and Xiaoke under Wu Qi's gaze. Zhang abruptly wakes and discovers herself lying across Wu Qi's lap, and he explains that she fainted after requesting his care, leaving him to catch and support her, before asking whether she has questions about the experience or the clues he uncovered. But Zhang only wants to know whether her trust and cooperation genuinely helped. So Wu Qi reassures her with a gentle touch and announces that the target has finally been found. And under the system's questioning, Wu prepares to name the person who engineered everything from concealment until cutification reaches 99%, and the monster's hesitation vanishes with 3442 displayed. Wu Qi answers the guide by naming his analytical ability, Endless Knowledge. Its abnormal item data can expose the intentions and actions responsible for a person's cutification. Yet common objects and corridors reveal only their own histories rather than the target directly. Yet shattered lights and sabotage surveillance leave investigators without a trail to the real planner, leaving only two possibilities. The target escaped campus, or Wu Qi's title is still too weak. Without explaining which answer he believes, Wu Qi leaves the room as Jiang hurries after him. Elsewhere, one gang member drinks stolen liquor while Yi Xiaofan faces renewed suspicion. Wang throws a can at him, furious that he brought alcohol but failed to secure the requested medicine, before closing a hand around the terrified student's neck and passing a sentence of damnation, until Wu Qi enters through the smoke with Jiang behind him and commands Wang to let Yi go. Wang welcomes the teacher with manic laughter and declares that any rescue attempt comes too late. He tightens his transformed grip and threatens to kill Yi before Wu Qi can intervene. But another gang member suddenly recoils as a terrifying reaction begins, and blood erupts from every bully's mouth, revealing that Yi poisoned the entire group. Even while choking, Wang clutches the boy's clothes until his remaining strength disappears, leaving Yi above the fallen tyrant and repeatedly confirming that Wang is dead, and feels along his injured cheek as though the word itself is too precious to believe, before breaking into wild laughter as the system identifies him, not Wang, as the true cutificator. Wu Qi explains that people trapped in darkness long enough may eventually embrace it themselves, horrifying Zhang before tapping Yi's skull and offering the mastermind a last opportunity to sleep, which drops the poison schemer onto his face as Zhang turns away from the sight. But Wu Qi turns away and calls this violent ending the last mercy fate could offer, until the system questions whether one blow truly resolved the cutification crisis, and Yi's body splits apart as the meter finally reaches 100%. His human shape erupts into a towering gray cud and places Wu Qi in immediate danger, so the assassin orders Jiang to run and stop making the battle more difficult, then launches a sharpened metal pen toward the creature's exposed eye, only for the point to shatter against the armored black surface without penetrating, proving even titanium useless before the cud drives a massive fist into Wu Qi's torso, hurling him across the room as the monster charges after him. Wu Qi catches the next claw with both hands and stops its momentum only inches away, then twists clear and recognizes that the change enhanced speed along with every physical attribute. But endless knowledge assures him that monstrous power cannot erase a fundamentally human structure, surrounding the charging cud with red analytical lines as it repeatedly cries the name Liang, until its familiar anatomy exposes vulnerable pressure points beginning with the Achilles heel, until Wu Shuqi focuses his force behind the ear and sends it into the inner hearing organ. The shaped energy veers unexpectedly and buries itself in the monster's nerve center. Then he climbs the towering body and hammers another focused blow into its spine, driving a narrow shock through the armored flesh until the internal defense gives way. The system mocks this textbook assault and warns that striking vital points cannot guarantee survival. Every cut embodies a liberated id and develops an ability shaped by its strongest desire. So the monster ignores its wounds, roars Liang again, and blasts Wu Qi away, throwing him through the classroom wall as broken masonry rains across the crowded courtyard. Zhang calls for Teacher Wu when frightened students see him crash onto the stones, while the cud forces itself through the ruined opening between concrete and smoke, revealing self-reinforcement, an unclassified attribute that multiplies its physical power tenfold. The system concedes that the creature outclasses Wu Qi just as it hurls itself into the open, and Jiang screams for the police when its burning eyes settle on the students, before the cud charges directly at her while still calling Liang, forcing Wu Qi back to his feet and between Jiang and the descending fist. The cud's blow crashes against Wu Qi's raised guard and forces a pained grunt from him. It immediately swings the other colossal arm across his defense and sprays blood, leaving Jiang frozen in horror with only her teacher's name on her lips, before another sweeping strike tears Wu Qi away and sends him tumbling through the courtyard, and his injured frame caves in the metal bins when it crashes among them. The system taunts Wu Qi for surrendering and urges him to die quickly so it can choose another host. Yet he scolds the avatar for desertion and calmly hints that a solution remains. Despite the monster's renewed charge, he focuses on something interesting discovered earlier, as endless knowledge marks self-reinforcement as learnable but warns that it will destroy a human body. The system calls the idea suicide, because no ordinary frame can contain a cud attribute, but Wu Qi activates it anyway, catches the incoming fist, and promises not to die easily. Endless knowledge draws compensating traits from a lizard, sparrow, wall, and pine tree, combining their structural advantages to suppress the backlash while he overpowers the surprised cud, even as his muscles are crushed and rebuilt through agony few people could endure, until sheer will drives his reinforced fist down against the monster's raised hand, detonating the courtyard stones and forcing nearby students to shield themselves from the debris. Wu Qi and the cud exchange impossibly rapid blows while the system doubts his body can last another minute, but he claims 10 seconds will be enough and evades the creature's spinning hammer arm, then declares his preparation complete as the countdown begins and a rising kick strikes its head, and when the impact hollows out the schoolyard, only 9 seconds remain. The cud forces its muscles to swell even further as it repeats Liang and grows increasingly monstrous. At 8 seconds, Wu Qi drops onto the giant limb and finds his footing among the shattered masonry, but the system warns that his current strength still cannot produce a lethal finishing blow. At 7 seconds, he asks what would happen if there were two versions of him, and tail docking leaves a bloody muscular duplicate behind, finally revealing his plan. With 5 seconds left, Wu Qi reshapes one reinforced arm into a crystalline weapon, compressing every trace of the copied cud power into that single limb as he dives, while the monster stretches its own arm skyward to meet him with 3 seconds remaining. Their condensed fists collide at 2 seconds and release a blinding burst around Wu Qi, before successive shocks thunder through the creature during the final second. The battered cud suddenly falls silent as cracks spread from the crystalline spike inside it, and the countdown reaches 0 while Wu Qi emerges from collapsing muscle and debris. The relieved system praises him, only to immediate completion of the true objective. Wu Qi ties back his hair and admits that less than 1% of his normal stamina remains, although the guide insists his copied ability can still eliminate an ordinary target with ease. He replies that this target is anything but ordinary, just as Yang calls out to him, before coming closer with the rescued students as the system turns their victory into a romantic joke. Wu Qi instead asks whether it ever considered who the real mission objective might be, then singles out one woman as ominous red eyes ignite throughout the crowd behind Jiang, who suddenly lunges into his guard and drives a concealed blade through his upper arm. Rather than fall, Jiang smiles and repeats the white-haired woman's old taunt, stunning Wu Qi and the system. The familiar words make him wonder whether Pinger truly is the woman from his previous life, yet he steadies the silver-haired student before her controlled body can collapse, as elegant footsteps announce Yu Lian, who politely asks whether teaching assistant Wu is unharmed, and the blonde tormentor asks what it is like to be betrayed by the pupil she trusted most, while Jiang and the surrounding students remain motionless behind glazed eyes, leaving the system confused by Yu Lian's completely transformed demeanor. But Wu Qi tears the blade from his arm and identifies her as the hidden instigator, spending his last strength to throw it while she dismisses the accusation as rude. But an enthralled athlete throws himself into its path and receives the crystal through one shoulder, then kneels as Yulian condemns Wu Qi for invading her paradise and damaging her toys. The system notices that nobody reacts to the wound or the enormous cud corpse nearby, and Yulian casually explains that every student around them is under hypnosis. Her direct answer horrifies the avatar because it means this enemy can see and hear it, marking her as an innate host, a titled existence found only once in 100 universes. Yulian claims that she needed no long preparation after noticing the system beside Wu Qi in the chemistry room, then sends her controlled students forward and admits that his 2-day investigation successfully drew her out. Wu Qi kicks through their coordinated assault as she mourns the collapse of her carefully built paradise, and possessively embraces Jiang while mocking his harsh manner for ruining any romantic opportunity. But the assassin responds with a brutal counterattack that drops the bat-wielding thralls around him. The students Wu Qi, already knocked unconscious, rise again under hypnosis and surround him with improvised weapons. Yu Lian explains that they must obey until death because she knows he cannot simply kill them, so he redirects their attacks into one another while the system questions how she discovered his restriction. Prolonged observation showed that he spared Wang despite possessing lethal chemicals and ample opportunity, and the visible system confirmed that a hidden rule protected her hypnotized toys, meaning his repeated provocations could only come from a mission involving her. Yu Lian correctly guesses the assignment and its deadline while Wu Qi evades the coordinated attacks, then suggests that she could simply flee as he kicks another controlled student aside. With the display showing only 12 hours, 21 minutes, and 10 seconds remaining, she reminds him that reaching her means sparing every human shield in between. Before Wu Qi questions why a woman who treats humans as playthings fixates so intensely on Zhang Ping'er, Yu Lian embraces the unresponsive girl and answers that the fixation comes from love, especially love for the proud expression Zhang wore after rescuing Xiao Ke, a radiant face Yu Lian wanted to destroy through repeated bullying, even arranging Xiao Ke's death, a confession that shocks Wu Qi and the system alike. And the recovered truth shows that Yu Lian, not Wang, was the person Xiao Ke dreaded at the end. While the possessive captor strokes Zhang's face and discusses the system, before ordering Wu Qi to kneel and beg, only for him to say that posture suits her better. Yu Lian bursts into laughter and asks whether the exhausted assassin still imagines he can win, but Wu Qi warns that accidents favor villains precisely when their victory seems certain. A new codification alert suddenly reaches 100%, confusing the system because every student remains hypnotized. Jiang is producing it, her grief for Xiao Ke swelling into darkness strong enough to unsettle Yu Lian, as black markings engulf her eyes and she accuses her former friend of arranging Xiao Ke's death. Nearby, Wu Qi redirects another shovel and announces that the real protagonist has awakened, while Yu Lian recoils and demands to know how Zhang escaped the hypnosis. Zhang condemns the manipulation and suffering of innocent people, but Yu Lian asks why nobody should rescue her. The furious girl answers that she deserves nothing and swings a darkness-covered fist toward her, leading the system to celebrate a powerful Cud ally capable of finishing Wu Qi's mission, though the assassin remembers planting this awakening through Mind's arc 5 minutes earlier. Inside Jiang's mind, he promised to reveal the truth about Xiao Ke if she regained consciousness, and her isolated awareness reached through confusion toward the light he offered, allowing black tendrils to scatter the hypnotized attackers now surrounding them. The system scolds Wu Qi for exploiting Zhang's hatred and letting codification endanger human lives, but he rejects Yu Lian's habit of watching others and declares that he prefers doing the killing himself. Another impact shakes the courtyard as he asks whether love or hatred is truly stronger, while Yu Lian delights in Zhang's darkness and insists that genuine kindness does not exist, urging Ping Ping to abandon her hypocrisy as the codified fist descends. Wu Qi stops the corrupted limb in mid-swing and tells the surprised manipulator that her fantasy ends here, then gently restrains the girl and explains that only kindness lets people recognize evil, before unexpectedly kissing Zhang and confronting her darkness with intimate trust instead of violence. Their lips remain together for one decisive moment while Wu Qi completes the intervention. The black influence recedes from Zhang's startled gaze until the familiar blue returns, leaving her furiously blushing as he cups her face with calm assurance, while Yu Lian rages that a simple kiss defeated her corruption like cheap television. Wu Qi turns toward the manipulator and promises an explanation when she reaches her next life, then snaps his fingers to activate a mechanism prepared during their earlier confrontation, launching a hidden crystalline spike directly through Yu Lian's forehead before she can react. Her death releases every hypnotized student and drops the controlled bodies unconscious, as the system declares victory and schedules Wu Qi's reward inside killing intent space. Red fragments begin carrying Wu Qi away, and he calmly recognizes the start of his transfer, yet Zhang clings to the dissolving wrist and asks in panic if Teacher Wu must go so soon. He says that he is merely returning to the place where he belongs as she asks whether they will meet again, and answers that she should hope they never do before smiling within the growing light, before a column of fire carries him skyward and leaves Zhang frozen below. Freed students awaken around her with no memory of their wounds or the ruined courtyard, and Zhang confesses to the vacant sky that she had hoped never to say goodbye to Teacher Wu. Wu Qi materializes inside the surreal realm known as Killing Intent Space C444, where the system explains that successful hosts await judgment before receiving their rewards. It happily admits that a full century passed since any of its incompetent predecessors returned, but Wu Qi focuses only on the claim that this domain admits hosts and nobody else. A black Cud aura suddenly deposits inside C444, leaving her confused by the colorful space. The Killing Intent system screams because it cannot understand how the girl followed Wu Qi, while elsewhere, a golden-masked guide tells the dead Yu Lian that earlier acceptance would have prevented defeat. The light hangs over the blood-soaked remains of the manipulator sprawled across the stone, when a burst of darkness forces the corpse upright into a blood-dripping shape, revealing Yu Lian as a pale spirit who treats occasional failure as entertainment. Students panic when her revived form openly changes beneath its torn clothing, but she dismisses ordinary standards and calls herself a thousand-year monster with different interests. Yu Lian accepts the offer of hosthood and eagerly anticipates meeting Wu Qi again, completing a queen bee transformation that awakens the top-ranked hive mind ability, before a transfer pillar engulfs her as she promises bloody revenge against Wu Qi and Ping Ping. Back in C444, the system realizes that Zhang entered freely through her controllable Cud state, and briefly suspects a second innate host before rejecting the impossible coincidence. Zhang apologetically kicks the floating avatar aside and says she only wants to remain with Teacher Wu, sending the offended guide tumbling through space while it protests her disrespect. As Wu Qi calmly asks whether entering this realm will trouble the family waiting at home, Zhang's hesitant reply reveals that she has no parents or relatives, while a pale female presence resembling her silently appears in the background, saying that a childhood consumed by labor and study gave her no companions before Yu Lian entered her life, earning the system's pity even as its unfinished response hints at another complication. The system orders Young back to her world and angrily tells her to stop causing trouble inside C444, but she admits that she followed Teacher Wu without learning how to return. A metallic evaluation device suddenly streaks toward Wu Qi as Zhang shouts a warning, though he refuses to resist because the approaching instrument only intends to judge his performance. An enormous ornamented scene folds before him and fills the realm with vapor, then presses a green mechanical probe against the center of his forehead. The display awards mission rank A, 5 talent points and 80% experience, before measuring Wu Qi's host potential at the unexpectedly modest rank C. The system calls this upper-middle talent, jokes that he may survive 10 worlds, and praises the rewards, until the scanner's flexible probe abruptly turns toward Zhang and startles them both, while the system complains that evaluating a stray half-cud wastes the judge's power. Zhang recoils when the probe targets her forehead, unable to understand the process, and Wu Qi pulls her aside as the instrument opens a secondary luminous sensor, which measures her at extraordinary A-level potential and erupts into feathers across C444. And its warning travels as far as a northern throne hall, where ancient entities sense a second Titan-level presence, crosses ancient Egypt as an Anubis-headed scholar announces the birth of a new son, catches the attention of supernatural observers during an ordinary day at a Japanese shrine, and awakens the senses of an owl-like English scholar beside a sleeping young witch, before feathers descend over Greece, New York, and Russia and spread the news worldwide. Back in C44, the system praises Zhang's potential and offers to grant her wishes as its host. Wu Qi swats the overeager avatar aside and calls Zhang remarkably loyal with an arm around her shoulders, while she asks whether a level talent means she can stay and memories of the white-haired killer trouble him. He avoids the subject and simply invites her to call him Wu Qi, leaving the girl blushing, as the system addresses them both as hosts and offers a private room for rest, only for the central instrument to announce another mission before either can recover. The embarrassed guide admits that rest must wait until they return alive from the next world, and Zhang touches Wu Qi's shoulder before softly repeating his name in concern, though a gentle pat comes with his promise to show her their common room on the next visit. Their system cuts short the flirtation and summons them onward when a transfer feather settles near Wu Qi, while orange light dissolves him and Zhang runs after the fading silhouette. Wu Qi awakens among energy-based citizens inside a luminous metropolis unlike anything on Earth, where every passerby presses fingers to the temples in the same synchronized gesture. Floating roads, hovering vehicles, and geometric towers reveal the scale of the technology, while his assigned body belongs to a pink-haired female officer with a barcode across her chest, leaving him baffled by a mechanical form that converts matter and energy beyond his understanding, as nearby alerts register 50% cutification, even though the mission has only begun. According to the system, Lanche Star is inhabited by energy-based beings whose law's blade can delete an individual's data, just as a public alert names Police Officer 9874 a wanted traitor and broadcasts her face. The guide remarks that she resembles Wu Qi, who dryly confirms that the wanted woman is his current body, while citizens repeat the temple gesture in response to the citywide announcement. The futuristic plaza abruptly distorts beneath Wu Qi and cuts off any chance to investigate, as red geometric barriers rise from the floor and isolate him from the watching crowd, before armored energy enforcers materialize inside the columns through flickering pixels. And the unit closes in on Officer 9874 as he calmly measures the combatants encircling him, then draws twin batons and spins between them, slicing green data from several bodies, only for their severed heads to reconnect and prove that ordinary cuts cannot destroy pure energy. Wu Qi is forced to reconsider the meaning of combat against beings with no physical form, while the system asks whether he intends to die before meeting his assigned partner, and an irritated demand to read the mission details answers his question about that partner. As the battle shatters nearby citizens into bright fragments across the plaza, the system sheepishly admits that it never transmitted the briefing and hurriedly corrects the mistake. The assignment is destroy capital, pitting 2 against 2 and demanding a kill before cutification occurs. A massive armored fist interrupts the explanation and drops toward Officer 9874, striking Wu Qi cleanly and blasting the borrowed body above the shattered ground, and the system ridicules his delayed response while neon towers streak past around him. Wu Qi activates endless knowledge and spreads analytical threads across every energy soldier, but their blank expressions remain unchanged because the technique finds nothing useful, revealing that it influences physical objects rather than life made from pure energy. More enforcers raise glowing weapons and advance beneath the useless red lines. Yet Wu Qi reasons that this host once died, so a way to destroy local energy must exist. Wu Qi connects one baton to the officer's belt and releases luminous bands between the buildings, then rides those energy ribbons back toward the enforcers as the system cheers, driving the extended weapon through one helmet while swinging past its guard, until the rainbow-edged blade cuts a precise glowing point inside the energy skull. Officer 9874 finally understands the weapon when her victim collapses without rebuilding, so Wu Qi lunges forward with both blades extended for another high-speed assault, carving through several enforcers with overlapping arcs of luminous color before turquoise lines pin and divide the entire formation into digital fragments, then drops into the middle of his fallen enemies, breathing hard with a transformed weapon in either hand, and explains that executions would attract stronger pursuers when the system asks why they survived, and settles on gathering intelligence until the promised ally descends beneath Golden Pagoda's light, whose emerald impact crushes the machines and converts their energy into solid matter. The newcomer introduces himself as Li Fei Hong, holder of Confucianism and partner to Killing Intent System 5214, while Wu Qi observes that the title made the pure energy machines physically vulnerable. Li's impenetrable jade body reconstructs his anatomy, and Golden Pagoda changes the laws within 1 meter, so the assembled blue teammates shake hands before Wu Qi asks how many titles exist, learning that 12 are known while his own avatar sulks at being ignored. Li jokingly suggests exchanging systems, forcing 5224 to defend itself against accusations of desertion, then asks Wu Qi's title directly but receives only a mysterious smile and the word secret. Although 5214 requests an exchange of abilities, Li gallantly accepts that girls may keep secrets. Wu Qi's system blurts out that the supposed woman is actually male and destroys the misunderstanding. Li and both mascots freeze in disbelief at the unexpected revelation, while the blushing warrior stares at Wu Qi and timidly changes his address to brother. Then begins an awkward confession of a long-held wish that makes the assassin increasingly uncomfortable, until Wu Qi recommends immediate retreat and cuts him off before the confession becomes worse. Airborne enforcement vehicles suddenly thunder above the distracted Li and snap him to attention, who leaps toward the leading vehicle before recalling Wu Qi's warning in midair. He declares that a real man must protect the pretty girl, then hastily corrects the word to brother. But past that patrol lies a sky crowded by a far larger enforcement armada, leaving him trapped by his own boast that a real man faces every challenge. Nearby towers break into unstable blocks as the capital escalates its defenses, and colossal armored machines rise across the street to surround the fleeing pair. So Li immediately revises his creed and decides that a real man listens to good advice, abandoning the confrontation and sprinting cheerfully after his brother. Li catches Wu Qi during the escape and asks both why he was abandoned and where they are going, while Officer 9874's memories reveal a specific location on the capital's internal map, prompting Wu Qi to lead them through missiles and giant machines toward that destination. Elsewhere, a hidden woman presses one hand against a tiled wall and senses the distant disturbance, then reports the blue team's location to an eccentric gathering of disguised figures, where red teammates Xiao Neon and Xiao Hua prepare as animism tracks the nearby events. Their chamber opens to a green-haired underling who commands the two women to come along, and claims that newly admitted members should feel honored to attend his superior at once. He leads the weakened pair upstairs through a hidden headquarters, then announces their arrival to the unseen master behind a closed door, which opens onto a horned leader surrounded by masked followers and decadent entertainment, where an enormous official hidden behind a jeweled cap and visor beckons the recruits toward him, while masked attendants crowd around them and laugh at their discomfort, until he drags each woman against his bulk and examines them like newly acquired property. He calls the captives quality goods and reaches toward them with absolute confidence, while behind the unsuspecting official, Xiao Nian conjures a gigantic fist beneath a demon mask. She smiles because the mission delivered its objective directly into her hands, then activates Fury Bodhi and launches a strike at 1000% strength. The officer remains delighted by her ferocity and shows no fear of the overwhelming attack, until an unexpected distortion catches the blow and leaves Xiao Nian staring in shock, while Xiao Hua recognizes teleportation as both teammates vanish before impact, reappearing upside down near the vaulted crystalline ceiling. Xiao Hua begins to suspect that the adversary belongs to the vanishingly rare class of innate hosts, but realizes that the phenomenon instead exchanged stored emotional energy points. Lanche's electronic citizens generate distinct forms of energy through their changing emotions, and Supreme Ruler Capet controls society by monopolizing the collection of those energies. Capet organizes the population into ranks determined by personal usefulness and closeness to himself, leaving ordinary commoners only 30 energy points to spend each day. Fighters and public servants receive hundreds or thousands of daily points, while his close subordinates and senior officials command the greatest allocations, making advancement nearly impossible as the officer barely pays the energy cost of teleportation. Weapons appear among his masked servants as he commands the deaths of both red intruders, while Xiaonian remembers that Capet's unmatched reserves make her 30 points hopelessly inadequate. She relies on her title ability despite being able to sustain it for only 2 minutes, activating immovable King Ming to create an absolute defense controlled by attacks and willpower before calmly judging the incoming energy bullets ordinary despite their strange composition. Xiaonian charges through the gunfire to test whether system abilities can damage energy life. As colossal blue guardian arms appear and smash the masked attackers aside, the officer raises a heavy cannon and mocks the difference between their reserves, then pours a concentrated barrage into her guarding manifestation and defensive field. But Xiaonian calls him foolish because her skill follows laws unrelated to energy summons, manifesting a gigantic armored deity whose descending strike overwhelms the chamber. As the frightened official steadies the cannon, Xiaonian begins invoking her opening technique once more, launching Fury Bodhi and forcing him to spend every remaining point on teleportation. Now aware of the danger, he resolves to report the intruder directly to Capit, but his escape fails inside a green hexagonal field and leaves him trapped. The enormous guardian's clenched fist descends before the officer can try again, while the approaching force makes him scream that no attack could possess this much power. Fury Bodhi collides directly with the energy form and bursts it into a radiant storm of data, scattering his visor, jeweled cap, and corrupted fragments throughout the ruins, while Xiaonian confirms that title abilities work against energy beings despite her exhaustion, and realizes that one minor boss nearly consumed the strength needed to confront Capit. Xiaohua holds the wounded Nian upright when a fresh impact rips open the headquarters beside them, revealing Wu Qi and Li Feihong bursting through the debris beneath raised guards. Li questions their destructive route while Wu Qi notices the weakened red team below, identifies Zhao Zhangshun as the only nearby 1,000-point user, and reconstructs the battle before the blue pair lands in front of Xiaonian and Xiaohua and recognizes their opponents. Xiaonian's system warns that the timing is terrible because her abilities remain unavailable, yet Xiaohua cautiously begins suggesting a response to her injured teammate. Wu Qi concludes that the women are the opposing team from the evidence around them, but his system forbids exploiting their weakness and stops him from drawing Officer 9874's blade. Police machines surround Wu Qi and order the wanted officer to stop resisting, so he reports that Zhao Zhangshun died while resisting arrest and requests the removal of all charges, leading the authorities to scan Zhao's remaining data for proof. Li asks how Wu Qi discovered the location after learning that 9874 was accused of betraying the police, and hears that the officer traded her life to obtain this crucial intelligence. Using the authorities' distraction, Xiaonian whispers that Xiaohua must escape now, just as a commanding blonde official arrives with armored escorts and surveys the ruins. He remarks that such destruction was worthwhile for catching a valuable fish, while the saluting machines identify him as Lansh's supreme ruler, Lord Capit, allowing both teams to recognize the true objective of their killing mission. Capit warmly tells Wu Qi that proving Zhao's crimes would make Officer 9874 a hero, but orders her escorted back while investigators confirm every detail. Wu Qi politely accepts and insists that cooperation remains part of police duty, introducing Li as an enthusiastic civilian informant who volunteered without entering official records, before Capit orders the machines to protect both young women and Li at the station. In private, the ruler remembers an incomplete message Zhao transmitted before dying and suspects everyone present, deciding to monitor every possible culprit while armored forces secure the headquarters. Wu Qi waits inside an empty interview room for the promised investigation, then grows suspicious when nobody arrives despite the importance of Zhao's case. Li suddenly crashes through the sealed doorway with both hands protecting his head, warning that the Red Team women deceived the authorities and trapped them, just as Capit enters to thank those women as heroines for their report, before branding Wu Qi an accomplice and sentencing both Bluehost to DreamWorks Factory. Wu Qi stares at the accusers in disbelief and struggles to understand how they reverse the story, until scanners reveal that Xiaonian and Xiaohua each possess 5,000 energy points. Wu Qi's system welcomes the Red Team's betrayal because retaliation is now permitted, while armed guards load Wu Qi and Li onto an armored bus bound for DreamWorks Factory. The assassin starts a countdown and tells his partner to charge toward 9 o'clock after 3 seconds, as Li eagerly agrees and prepares to break the restraints around his wrists, until both prisoners snap their chains while the escort remains unsuspecting, then spin through the guards with wide kicks that clear the bus around them. The freed partners sprint away from the convoy as surviving officers begin pursuit, only for a silver-haired female commander and her armed unit to block the road. Li attacks with impenetrable jade body while Wu Qi suddenly notices something important, but the warrior's reconstructed muscles already swell behind an overwhelming punch, until the system identifies the commander as Zhang Pinger, somehow escaped from C-444. Wu Qi grabs Li's shoulder and stops the blow at the last moment, leaving his confused partner complaining as ordinary guards surround them again. Zhang dismisses every other officer and orders them to leave the captives entirely to her, despite a subordinate warning that their combined combat power exceeded all expectations. She assumes he means compared with her and confidently rejects the concern, then faces Wu Qi alone without displaying the slightest fear, while Li watches the retreating squad and warns that this commander will be dangerous. Zhang suddenly embraces Wu Qi and joyfully calls him teacher, shocking his partner, as Wu explains that the system revealed her identity and asks how she became a girl. Zhang cannot explain the recognition and only knows with certainty that Wu Qi is her teacher, shyly suggesting that their hearts remain connected across worlds and different bodies. His furious system rejects the romantic theory and demands to know how she entered this mission, while Zhang pauses beside an increasingly impatient Wu Qi and searches for an answer, before admitting complete ignorance and unsettling both teacher and guide. Wu Qi questions whether the woman can really be their Zhang, and the system studies what her new vessel may hide, then watches her exchange friendly introductions with Li while considering the mystery. Pressed for time, Zhang asks directly whether their current objective involves ruler Capet, but Wu Qi has questions of his own, especially how she mastered the role so quickly, unaware that Capet is remotely watching their reunion through a surveillance display. In another part of the complex, Xiaonian confronts Capet over letting the two dangerous blue hosts get away, but he claims DreamWorks Factory gives every criminal an opportunity to reform. She realizes that Capet will not eliminate her rivals as he orders her to replace Zhao, and reluctantly accepts the work while supporting the wounded Xiaohua, before both red hosts excuse themselves and prepare a new strategy. Capet turns back to the monitoring station as Xiaonian escorts her companion from the room, and once outside, the women exchange a glance confirming the same tactical decision. Their system mascots open a private team channel for secret planning, protected from every form of outside surveillance or eavesdropping, as Xiaonian admits that using Capet against the blue team before killing him has failed. Xiaohua says Zhao's inherited authority can distribute energy but never gather enough of it to surpass Capet, leaving only one workable assassination strategy. They will cutify other people with all creations have spirit and turn the victims against him, beginning with a scan of guard Zhongsan's virtual body, which lets Xiaohua raise the 32-year-old man's cutification through a single touch. Meanwhile, Wu Qi and Li travel among complaining prisoners toward forced reform, while Li bombards his teammate with questions about Zhong, hosthood, and the energy transfer. Wu Qi admits that he has no answers and redirects their attention to mission intelligence, so Li summarizes a world ruled by energy, the supreme target Capet, and two unpredictable opponents, before Wu agrees that conventional attacks cannot overcome the ruler's control of local laws. Wu Qi's own abilities require material targets, while Li's tidal powers carry severe restrictions. The warrior admits he can fight at full strength for only 90 seconds before crippling headaches begin, making it unlikely that even Sunflower Acupuncture Hand could kill Capet quickly enough, so Wu Qi proposes the only remaining indirect solution, and Li's widening eyes reveal that he understands the dangerous idea. Capet placed exploitable backdoors inside 4 of his most trusted subordinates, and when Li asks where to find them, the bus arrives at its destination. Wu Qi chooses DreamWorks Factory and Magistrate Mr. E as their first practice target, while the flamboyant ruler welcomes the arriving prisoners as new admirers, inviting Wu Qi into his family without realizing that she intends to exploit him. Li worries that finding one hidden backdoor inside the enormous amusement park will be impossible, and suggests seizing a worker for interrogation instead of following Wu Qi's patient approach. An announcement promises a personal meeting with Mr. E to everyone who completes newcomer training, making Li suspect that the easy invitation conceals a trap. But Wu Qi immediately requests 2 places from the nearby cheerleaders, and after seeing a reluctant visitor punished, Li abandons his objection and follows. From nearby, he observes newly converted followers celebrating around a different fallen captive, while grim attendants and acrobatic cheerleaders wordlessly pressure him into orientation. Li joins the chanting procession and pretends enthusiasm to reach the promised meeting, until a dark theater convinces Wu Qi that the real procedure is about to begin. She tells Li that his concealed skills inspired several useful ideas for the coming test, but ignores his demand for details and chooses to observe first. While one performer presents a nameless subject and chants that existence begins and ends with Mr. E, just as automated restraints lock Wu Qi's limbs and torso against the chair, before waves of agonizing stimulation make the bound audience scream for release. The presentation continues beneath relentless declarations of Mr. E's supremacy, and Wu Qi endures the mechanism while recognizing its psychological design. A glittering portrait of the magistrate appears, and the captives repeat a worshipful slogan, revealing a Milgram-style obedience experiment meant to turn every prisoner into his fan by exploiting submission to authority even when commands violate the conscience. Wu Qi secretly forms an energy blade and cuts through the restraining straps, then detects hypnotic gas that her assassin training can resist. After freeing herself, she tells the struggling Li to wait and leaves to investigate, while he desperately repeats martial teachings and family memories against the implanted loyalty, though Wu realizes that his resistance only gives Mr. E more leverage. Discovering that the orientation also relies on powerful sedatives, Wu Qi retrieves an injector, but the drug fails against the conditioning already controlling Li. He becomes a striped factory prisoner claimed by Mr. E's family, then attacks Wu Qi with reconstructed strength and forces her backward, until she impales the magistrate's nearby body and shouts for her partner to identify the true enemy. The system notes the predictable betrayal while Wu Qi urgently questions Li's mascot Gulu, but blank-eyed Li answers with another furious charge. Gulu explains that past memories now convince the trapped warrior that Wu Qi is his enemy, forcing her to counter with a body blow that hurls him sideways before both fighters recover their footing and search for another opening. Wu Qi fires a weapon while sliding beneath beneath Lee's continuing pursuit, comparing his power to a cud but hesitating to buy anything that could seriously hurt him. She regrets not killing Mr. E earlier until the system insists that she already did, as the magistrate reappears through another family member and proves death cannot end his control, declaring that no number of destroyed bodies will eliminate his presence. Mr. E transfers into family members after murdering each discarded host, while Gulu confirms seeing the spiritual form leap between two people. Lee's again as the possessing magistrate invites Wu Qi to join the family, forcing her to block a devastating punch that drives her into the theater furniture, before a relentless sequence of green energy blows begins overwhelming her defense. Wu Qi fears that Lee's uncontrolled assault will soon exhaust her endurance, and one crushing strike finally smashes her through the floor. Mr. E approaches the apparently unconscious assassin while Lee guards the conquest, then reaches down and personally welcomes her into his boundless family, only for Wu Qi to seize his wrist and reveal that she prepared this counterattack. The magistrate realizes she is unharmed as Wu Qi maintains the grip and signals Lee, who instantly returns to normal and shocks Mr. E by answering her call. Their mascots merge into a split-faced avatar and synchronize the partner's abilities, while Lee invokes Golden Pagoda and condemns the magistrate for hurting Wu Qi. But when Mr. E boasts about resurrection, she reveals that they never intended to kill him. Golden Pagoda instead combines with endless knowledge against the spiritual network, producing a blazing boat-like domain that Mr. E cannot recognize. Wu Qi mockingly calls herself an ordinary passerby from within the luminous construction, then demands the hidden back door and every secret behind Capet's authority, as the magistrate finds her seated beneath his own looming consciousness. Wu Qi explores memories of Capet recruiting Mr. E from society's forgotten citizens and watches machines surgically reconstruct his injured material body. The bandaged recruit examines an altered face while Capet observes from behind, before emerging as DreamWorks Factory's adored magistrate among cheering followers, until the memories expose Capet's back door as the eyes embedded in Mr. E's palms. Wu Qi escapes the combined skill vessel while Lee anxiously calls after her, then collapses exhausted onto the broken floor and alarms both partner and mascot. She triumphantly produces an extracted eye-shaped fragment and confirms that the back door is secured, while unfamiliar power flows from it directly into her mind, and Mr. E recognizes Wu Qi as a visitor from another world. The magistrate glimpsed Lee's memories during possession and discovered universes dominated by matter, but confidently insists Wu Qi cannot enforce secrecy by killing him. His existence will supposedly survive forever within Lord Capet's hands regardless of bodily destruction, until his energy begins disintegrating before the interrogation can continue, revealing Capet's self-destruct program as Mr. E offers one final piece of information. The dissolving magistrate calls his destruction an eternal act of glory for Lord Capet, then erupts into brilliant digital flames while Wu Qi and Lee watch. Lee admits that their victory feels disturbingly similar to defeat, but Wu Qi urges him to secure another energy source before the warning brings Capet, who activates a control display elsewhere with Jiang standing silently in his office. Capet staggers under sudden feedback from the stolen back door and clutches his forehead, while Jiang rushes forward with false concern until he signals her to stop. The ruler explains that thieves stole the program guarded by Mr. E, so Jiang challenges the newcomers aloud even as she secretly rejoices that teacher's plan worked, though she notices that Capet somehow knows events he never witnessed and seems pleased. Capet guesses her unspoken question and reacts to the loss with amusement rather than anger, then displays Mr. E's final transmitted image of the combined ability. He identifies the power as something foreign to Lanche while Jiang performs astonishment, and notes that 9874 called Lee an informant despite records showing no earlier contact, while official history claims both the officer and her companion already died. Capet asks why resurrected outsiders would return for one of his protected back doors, and calls the hosts heavenly gifts suited to completing an immortality plan. When Zhang remains confused, he begins explaining the planetary crisis, describing how Lanche's irreversible energy decay led him to create the energy value system, which harvests emotion to sustain the weakening world and extend its people's lives. Repeated manipulation gradually made the citizens apathetic and difficult to stimulate, which is why Capet installed Zhao, Zhang, Mr. E, and Kilts over the world's essential domains. He dismisses public rule because ordinary people are short-sighted and require superior leadership, but believes the resurrected outsiders could provide a new way to revive Lanche, leaving Zhang outwardly cooperative and inwardly terrified by his ego and surveillance. Zhang offers to seize the intruders, only for Capet to say that a larger operation is already in motion, and an emergency screen reveals a monster tearing through security elsewhere in the facility. The armored Cud launches crossing energy slashes through the defensive squad, piercing several cores and dropping the officers screaming across the corridor, while Xiaonian and Xiaohua secretly celebrate the level 1 creature they created. Zhang debates fleeing to preserve her cover or using the chaos to help Wu Qi kill Capet, then publicly recommends retreat while privately considering the assassination opportunity. Capet rebukes her fear and claims that no bug can frighten a lion, turning his back on the attacking Cud and issuing the single command lock which traps the enormous creature inside a luminous geometric cage. Capet follows with the absolute order erase, and his authority dissolves the Cud and nearby bodies into streams of energy. Zhang and the red team stare at the effortless annihilation, while the ruler stands among the vaporized remains and reminds them who controls this world's laws. Before declaring himself God and displaying power far beyond either team's expectations, Capet expects Kiltz to bring back the two anomalies as his own forces cleanse the complex of anything suspect, prompting an alarmed Zhang to ask what clearing the surroundings means. He begins checking everyone's data to eliminate all outsiders as troublesome bugs, leaving her unable to warn Wu Qi without exposing her own false identity. So she silently apologizes that teacher must survive without her help. Wu Qi refuses to free Mr. Yi's remaining family as they leave the ruined factory, calling the hypnotized civilians useful combat power while Principal Li compares her with the magistrate. She argues that energy control means little without enough followers to compete in quantity, especially when Capet must possess reserves far beyond the public numbers. But Li snatches the eye-shaped back door before she can use it. He declares that a good man never exploits others and refuses to return the leverage, while Wu Qi proposes a friendly win-win in which she controls it herself. Their argument ends when a flamboyant executive arrives in a red sports car, claims the stolen back door, activates employee attendance, and offers KPI rewards for both hosts, sending waves of suited workers forward with promises of doubled year-end bonuses. Wu Qi kicks one attacker aside and insists that righteous people cannot cooperate with evil, but Li argues that mission success requires every advantage as he drops another worker. She counters that necessity never excuses harming others while their enemy enjoys the dispute, then blocks an incoming punch and promises to demonstrate a better method, as Li reconstructs his muscles through impenetrable jade body and fights independently. An expanding green shockwave erupts from Li as he claims victory without exploitation, before a reinforced fist crashes into one employee's face at close range. Another suited fighter flies backward while Li tears through the workforce, before hammering the red uniformed bodyguard with a swift sequence of attacks, finishing with a rising kick that launches the man high across the arena. Li follows with a brutal kick that drives the enforcer headfirst over the shattered floor, and seizes a second worker, using his skull to strike the face of the first. Two more workers fly away as their numerical advantage collapses, until an exhausted Li lands beside Wu Qi with the red-suited fighter behind him, proudly calling the performance a good man's determination and earning restrained approval. Strange laughter from the defeated executive immediately turns both hosts around, while the victim calmly totals his damage at 128 minor wounds, 72 major ones, and 3 that should be lethal. Li protests that he never struck the man's head and wonders why he now sounds foolish. But the smiling executive promises a reward for causing such catastrophic harm, before pulling apart his shirt and exposing a luminous market board embedded across his torso. Nearby employees panic that Boss G's condition means financial ruin for them all, before red notices threaten repeated 50% salary cuts for their failure. The workers absorb the executive's injuries and collapse as wounds appear across their bodies, allowing Wu Qi and Li to understand that he redistributed the damage, just as the restored man introduces himself as Company A President Kiltz and unveils hedging risk. Kiltz announces his turn with every wound completely erased, then orders the terrified staff to bind both hosts within 5 minutes. A performance assessment doubles employees' speed and defense until they capture the targets, but Wu Qi asks whether Kiltz truly refuses to surrender Capet's back door, while Li tries convincing the controlled workers that the hosts came to rescue them. The employees insist that nobody controls them and demand his willing surrender, so Li avoids their rush and asks why free people would defend such a villain. One worker admits that rebellion could erase the energy needed to feed a family, while another tearfully condemns his protected idealism as selfish nonsense, explaining that everyone desires heroism but real survival demands obedience. Their desperation shakes Li because he cannot reconcile dignity with coerced submission, until Wu Qi discreetly gives him a blue injection and reminds him that choice remains. Employees restrain Li as he asks whether she truly believes everyone can be rescued, and Wu answers that people save themselves while heroes merely create the opportunity, inspiring him to erupt with renewed jade body strength and blast the surrounding workers away. Wu Qi prepares a green injection and orders Li to think beyond rigid principles, but he fixes her with a stern stare and warns her not to break the promise. Clutching the eye-shaped back door, she playfully embraces a more audacious strategy and casually offers her strange companions as new recruits, even as Kiltz warns that nobody will be paid. Mistaking the proposal for surrender, Kiltz welcomes the newcomers into his corporate machine, but Wu Qi presents Mr. Yi's relatives as her own faction and announces that she will take the president's chair. Kiltz calls her greedy and promises death before she can take his position, prompting both leaders to launch their assembled forces while trading boasts, until the crowds collide in an eruption of pink energy and flying bodies, as Kiltz suddenly charges through the chaos toward Wu Qi. A vast green data wave sweeps across DreamWorks and forces Wu Qi and Li to halt their battle, while Kiltz recognizes Capet's search for outsiders and wonders what power earned the ruler's attention, and suspends the confrontation while imagining their alien power turned against Capet instead. Elsewhere, Capet runs the scan beside a nervous Zhang as another blonde subordinate watches the results, and she asks whether he distrusts a loyal follower, while privately fearing that her disguise has failed. Capet claims claims that everyone must be checked whether or not an obvious abnormality appears, leaving Zhang trapped enough to draw a green pistol and prepare the first strike. Capet calmly isolates an anomalous signature among the streaming data, just as Zhang abandons caution and fires to protect Wu Qi from discovery. But the result exposes two arriving outsiders connected to Zhao's death rather than her, allowing Zhang to celebrate silently as the newcomers become Capet's targets, before he assigns their execution to her as an apology for his suspicion. Zhang politely thanks him while aiming the pistol at two wary young women, though inwardly she panics because she has never killed anyone and sees only children. Capet withdraws and leaves the confrontation to his supposedly loyal subordinate, hoping to test the outsiders against Zhang and her title, Death Apotheosis, then mocks her visible tension as excitement for the coming battle. Zhang delivers a murderous threat while privately begging both intruders to surrender, but the women judge her unimpressive and still agree that her reputation demands caution. The masked maid moves first, forcing Zhang to fire the green energy pistol. Xiao Nian slips past the opening shot and closes the distance before Zhang can recover, making the disguised student fear that one assault could expose her and kill the borrowed body. Nian sees apparent weakness and drives Fury Bodhi's enormous fist toward her, but Zhang's body reacts on instinct with a kick that catches the attacker unprepared, revealing automatic combat skills far beyond Zhang's personal experience, inherited from the former assassin whose muscle memory still guides the pursuit. Those instincts seize control again and launch Yang into another precise strike, before a massive translucent fist crushes Neon's attempted counterattack. Enraged by the humiliation, Neon makes Fury Bodhi swell into an immense golden giant. But Jiang splits the giant fist with an energy blade beneath Capet's amused gaze. Capet observes that his subordinate commands nearly 20% of the world's energy, and views the outsiders as heaven-sent resources for his eternal life plan. Nian recognizes that Zhang can distort space and place ordinary tactics at a disadvantage, so she orders Xiaohua to cutify the commander into a monster powerful enough to kill Capet. Animism accesses Zhang Pinger's hidden cutification state despite the disguise, opening a system panel with direct control over the dangerous transformation. Xiaohua reaches for the setting and prepares to force it upward, but Zhang senses catastrophe and lunges with her energy blade first, cutting through the maid's body, even as Hua invokes the sibling as their strength, leaving Zhang frozen by the blood while Nian watches the wounded Hua remain upright. No transformation follows, and both red hosts stare at Zhang in disbelief, while Capet correctly concludes that Hua's intended effect mysteriously failed. The wounded host protests that cutification reached its maximum without producing anything, and Neon considers another transmigrator but detects none of the expected yin-yang reaction. Capet decides that only Neon has value and orders Jiang to kill Hua before capturing the sister, so she obeys outwardly while silently begging them to reveal another countermeasure. Bloodied Hua rejects the label of trash as Neon steadies the distraught brother, and Jiang deliberately swings aside in an attempt to fake a lethal blow, only for a huge blue fist to slam both siblings together and ruin the planned miss. Nian coughs blood into the air while Hua catches her falling sister with a desperate cry, and a scarlet brand flares over the maid's chest from mingled terror and shame. Capet impatiently orders Jiang to stop delaying and kill the useless boy, leaving her apologizing and despairing that the murderous facade cannot survive without Wu Qi, until she lowers her cap and silently calls for teacher. A familiar voice criticizes Zhang's slow execution and answers the desperate hope for rescue, as Kiltz enters with the apparently captured Wu Qi and Li and presents them to Capet. Overwhelmed, Zhang raises her blade and angrily shouts the executive's name, but Wu Qi's subtle wink reminds her that teacher would never surrender without a plan, making her wonder how the false capture serves his strategy. Earlier, Kiltz proposed negotiations after deciding that the host could help him eliminate Capet, and although Li rejected surrender, Wu Qi invited the executive to continue. Kiltz explained that they forced Capet into his first worldwide investigation since taking control, but Wu Qi remained unimpressed and demanded the actual point, until he offered his own backdoor as proof of an alliance. Wu Qi asked what service Kiltz expected while Li gripped the displayed fragment, and learned that the executive wanted help seizing Capet rather than escaping him. Li questioned how anyone could challenge the ruler after surrendering such valuable leverage, but Kiltz claimed that direct confrontation was unnecessary because he knew a hidden secret, which would supposedly guarantee victory over the untouchable ruler. Wu Qi noted that such certainty should make their assistance unnecessary, but Kiltz raised one finger and playfully introduced the missing condition. Wu Qi and Li must restrain Capet for exactly 30 uninterrupted seconds, giving the executive enough time to bring him down through the secret method. Inside the chamber again, Kiltz drives his restrained allies ahead as Li performs noisy false resistance, and Capet praises the secretary for completing their capture. Kiltz bows like a faithful subordinate as Jiang anxiously studies teacher's plan, while Nian and Hua notice something concealed within the captor's movements, because Wu Qi and Li shield the orange control sphere secretly held behind them. Nian realizes that all three have joined forces even as Kiltz maintains perfect deference. Then Li surges forward and snaps his restraints while red energy circles Wu Qi. The warrior pins Capet against the chair and prompts an accusation of betrayal, but Kiltz claims that distributing fragments of supreme authority placed this weapon in his hands before beginning an energy takeover that requires only 30 seconds. Wu Qi confirms why the ruler must be held while Kiltz laughs through the transfer, and Zhang expects an easy victory until Nian bitterly suggests surrender, Xiaohua refuses to abandon the mission despite their disadvantages, while Zhang notices Wu Qi's grim expression as Capet prepares a response. Kiltz explains that every energy reservoir has a fixed upper limit, and that the back doors stored Capet's overflow until secret exploitation made the subordinate stronger. Yet Wu Qi and Li grow suspicious because their target offers no real resistance, even as Kiltz proclaims new management while the stolen energy floods his body. Xiaonian directs Fury Bodhi down upon Capet and declares that Red will take the kill, while Zhang recognizes that her relief came too early and readies herself to join the collision. Determined to support Wu Qi, she rushes into the chamber's dangerous power, while Xiaohua tries stopping her with a threat too weak to be convincing, and answers Jiang's demand for surrender with unsettling laughter. Capet catches Neon's enormous golden fist barehanded and calls the attack boring, then deliberately releases all remaining energy for Kiltz to absorb. The transfer engulfs the executive in red-white power and instantly destroys his confidence, as a gigantic sphere expands around Capet and alarms every host. Regaining his stance, Kiltz claims that more than 100 million units of energy can fit inside his body, but Wu Qi, Li, Jiang, Nian, and Hua answer with stunned silence rather than fear. Mistaking their disbelief for intimidation, he demands acknowledgement of his power until Nian calls him pathetic as the stolen energy swells his body into a bloated mass. Capet remarks that 100 million only surpasses his strength from ancient times, then declares himself a god beyond worldly conventions and promises Lanshe a new era. The terrified Kiltz finally asks the true extent of his capacity, and hears that Capet stopped counting after the reserves exceeded 1 zhao, leaving the executive floating helplessly beneath energy he cannot contain. Capet immobilizes Wu Qi and Li before calmly measuring his own overflow, then chooses the gathered outsiders as experimental targets with a snap. Trapped power erupts through Kiltz in several incandescent spikes, and the chamber disappears inside a blinding explosion that forces everyone to shield themselves, while Zhang's terror drives cutification to 90%. A deafening detonation blooms around Kiltz and rips apart the command facility, sending panicked guards through corridors consumed by the expanding fireball. And a vast column shoots from the tower, crosses space, and reaches the faraway planet until the clearing smoke shows Capet alone on his feet among hosts strewn over the wreckage. Capet pins Nian beneath 1 foot and praises her survival after a blast exceeding 1 zhao, but an impact from behind reveals that another opponent survived. Xiaohua manifests a towering crimson cud and demands that the ruler release Nian. While a second furious insult makes Capet turn toward an equally surprising survivor, Zhang approaches with a drawn blade and leaves him wondering whether she transformed as well. With darkness filling her eyes, Zhang reserves for herself the punishment of whoever harmed her beloved teacher, while she and Hua charge together and each threatens to kill Capet first. The enraged attackers converge around a ruler relaxed between their competing claims, until he raises a blue barrier and calls their challenge unforgivably stupid. Zhang and Hua continue arguing even while hammering the shield from opposite sides, and their rapid blows spread deep cracks across its surface. Capet's confident smile turns curious when the combined pressure finally interests him, while Wu Qi and Li wonder who Zhang truly is and how she gained such power. Nian warns that sustaining the reckless barrage will kill Hua, and desperately repeats that her brother must stop. Zhang and Hua answer with simultaneous finishing blows that shatter Capet's barrier, creating another golden explosion that throws the wounded observers backward. Li rejoices as though the fight is finished, but Wu Qi watches the smoke without sharing his certainty, and Nian shares the uncertain relief by asking whether Pat is truly finished. The unharmed ruler emerges holding Zhang and dismisses both attacks, then reconsiders their value to his plan before stomping Hua's crimson body, leaving the wounded host coughing blood as Nian rushes forward. Hua insists on continuing, but Nian warns that the side effects make another attack impossible, then formally surrenders the mission to protect her brother and requests extraction. The blue mascot appears as she desperately repeats the plea, only for Capet to drive an energy blade through Nian's torso before escape begins, and bloodied Hua catches the collapsing sister in horror. As the borrowed body breaks into data, the dying Neon begs her brother to escape without her, but Capet blocks their retreat and leaves Hua screaming as she fades. But he refuses to abandon her as Neon dissolves into streams of blue information, and Zhang struggles in his grasp as the final usable backdoor disappears. Wu Qi's system estimates that Capet approaches life level 4, making normal competition impossible, but the assassin admits that one much riskier option remains. She whispers the method to Li and warns that merely knowing it may get him killed, while Capet chokes Jiang and laughs at the outsider's exhausted challenge. Enraged, Hua charges again and demands the return of the wounded sister, but Capet catches the fist and mocks such a disadvantaged attack. Crimson energy spreads beneath them as the power mutates into something deadlier, and Hua repeats the demand through an aura of absolute murderous resolve, while Bloodthirst Berserk enlarges the Crimson Avatar into a gigantic beast. The roaring monster drives an enormous fist into Capet's body, blasting Zhang aside and forcing the ruler backward across the shattered platform. Wu Qi catches his student before she reaches the rubble and holds her safely, while Zhang confesses that all her suffering still left her unable to protect the others, but teacher reassures her that she has done enough and accepts responsibility for the rest. Together, they watch Hua's berserk form batter Capit's reconstructed barrier, while Zhang fears that Wu Qi's hidden method requires the same self-sacrifice, and condemns her own helplessness while Cud corruption creeps farther over her features, until Capit dismisses Hua's struggle and blasts the monster backward. Capit loses 10,000 energy units to the blow, yet claims his enormous reserve makes death impossible, and declares that nobody can kill him while the supply remains. Wu Qi challenges the claim by asking what happens when that supply is severed, drawing Capit's attention to the prepared countermeasure behind him. The ruler calls energy severance the century's stupidest joke until green data flashes across his eyes and replaces mockery with shock. Enormous reserves begin disappearing as code coils around his body, while Li praises the reversal and Wu Qi names it overturning the boat, leaving Capit staring at his draining hand and demanding an explanation. Li reveals that they broadcast the ruler's arrogant speech to every citizen on Lanshe, and the collapsing energy foundation leaves Capit vulnerable to Hua's next blow. Wu Qi explains that Mr. E and kilts expose the weakness, and Zhang recalls his theatrical speeches, finally seeing that his Chunibyu obsession made the deception work, because citizens were finally shown enough truth to choose whether the manipulation continued. Their furious rejection leaves Capit helpless beneath Hua's merciless assault, and when Zhang worries about the mission, Wu Qi insists that survival matters more. While the Crimson Beast restrains a battered Capit and he unexpectedly praises the spectacle they created, but losing a quadrillion points keeps him kneeling for only a moment before a countermeasure activates. Capit unveils an enormous mechanized body and calls it his never-needed trump card, then sends Hua's multiform beast crashing through the ruined arena. Wu Qi, Zhang, and Li stare as the armored ruler stands above the roaring monster, charging a colossal arm cannon while preparing to explain his surviving power, before firing into Hua and revealing that superficial software never governed the energy. Even riddled with holes, Hua stays upright and earns praise for the monster's toughness, while Wu Qi realizes that Capit implanted a physical system inside every citizen. The ruler raises his glowing cannon for another shot and smirks at her deduction, explaining that emotional energy still enters him physically after the outer layer disconnects, so the population's rage has made him stronger than ever while Hua lies defeated. Capit coldly thanks Wu Qi for provoking the citizens and feeding his biological network, but as Li jokes about dying together, she insists that both of them will survive. The ruler aims his cannon and promises only a brief delay before their deaths, then releases a massive blast that forces the partners apart, relentlessly tracking every attempt to escape. Wu Qi lands a sword strike across Capit's armored head, but he dismisses the effort, and a spherical barrier hurls her helplessly through the ruined chamber. Zhang and Li converge beside teacher as Capit mocks the ant's teamwork, before throwing simultaneous giant fists toward attackers charging from either side. But Li catches one mechanical hand while Zhang slips across the other arm. Both cling to the armor and restrain Capit's arms despite his confidence, allowing Golden Pagoda's second form to turn the energy body into tangible matter. Capit watches the colossal armor vanish and understands that he no longer exists in the same form, while Wu Qi explains that their disadvantage ends once he becomes something they can control. Using learnable connections, she borrows Li's structural alteration and Zhang's power to create cuds, then fuses both with endless knowledge and forcibly cutifies the materialized ruler, until Capit's body folds into a dense crimson cocoon and the three hosts stagger back, leaving Li to ask whether the plan worked and Wu Qi to order immediate extraction. The mission declares Capit dead and gives both blue hosts 10 seconds before departure, while Li praises the insight that complete cutification functions as death. But after only a moment, the system reports an undead level 4 cud and a timer already at 9 seconds, and both partners stare past a confused Jiang as the danger focuses on her. Jiang lowers her eyes in shock as an ominous fissure tears across her abdomen, because undead Capit has materialized directly behind her. A bloodied blade-like arm emerges after stabbing through her back, and the grinning monster radiates pressure as the countdown reaches 8 seconds. With Jiang collapsed nearby, sword-wielding Capit turns toward Wu Qi and Li, while the system urges flight but the crushing aura prevents immediate movement. Wu Qi recognizes pressure far beyond the earlier cud and feels both hosts immobilized, until Capit places the blade against her throat and makes her wonder whether everything ends here. The undead ruler swings for a finishing cut before extraction can arrive, and blood sprays across Li as he desperately calls to his brother. But Hua's crimson claw punches through Capit first and interrupts the strike, before the surviving beast curses him and attacks again from behind. Crystal growths impale Capit from within while Hua rips the undead shell into pieces. Yet the fragments twist into a digital vortex and refuse permanent destruction. Li's brief celebration ends when darkness continues gathering around the remains, rebuilding severed limbs around the core with 7 seconds left, while Hua roars and drives another massive fist into the regenerating vortex. The mascot warns that a level 4 cud is nearly immortal and far beyond Wu Qi's strength, but when Li demands another plan, she prepares Mind's Arc to force her frozen body forward. Intense mental stimulation overrides the undead pressure, though an unexpected sensation makes Wu Qi pause before the desperate charge, as Hua carries wounded Zhang into the swirling darkness beneath shielding crimson limbs. The worsening danger finally convinces both mascots to step in and pull the entire group to safety. Wu Chi surges toward the vortex anyway, prompting one mascot to wonder whether she has finally reached her limit. But undead Capit steps from the purple spiral without a scratch and calmly waits for her attack, while the battered survivors brace themselves and Lee mourns that he may die without continuing his family line. Wu insists that they still have a chance because the system has just opened another skill to her, and with only 6 seconds left, she reveals the reward she chose, the level 2 title of Pilgrim, then fixes her attention on the mascot's learnable allocate ability and proposes a dangerously powerful combination. Recalling the mascot's hurried conversation, Wu demands the escape method they tried to conceal, takes allocate through endless knowledge despite its owner's protests, and accepts its brutal side effects once she learns that it can temporarily multiply a host's potential. She fuses Hua's bloodthirst berserk with Li's golden pagoda, using one to amplify power and the other to restrain the backlash, before adding Zhang's codification and drawing the strength of every surviving companion into allocate. Dark violet energy swallows her, scattering the outline of the borrowed body into drifting fragments. From that storm emerges a towering, long-haired warrior framed by banners and spear-tipped ribbons, black markings spreading over her transformed face as she locks her gaze on Capit. The level 2 Pilgrim is complete, though extraction is now only 4 seconds away. Hua and Li stare at the immense figure in disbelief, and even Capit grows quiet as he measures the opponent advancing toward him. Then Wu rushes in and catches his spear with one bare hand, killing its momentum instantly. Every clash sends fresh shockwaves through the ruins as the timer falls to 3 seconds, and at 2, Wu drives a straight punch toward Capit's face. He catches it with a block at the final second, leaving the two locked together. The countdown reaches 0, and Wu disappears in the middle of the attack, so Capit's answering swing cuts through nothing but dissolving talismans and a fading afterimage. Stranded among the floating wreckage, the undead monster screams as his prey escapes. Inside the extraction passage, Li carries an exhausted Wu and excitedly praises her final transformation, until her original black-haired body coughs up blood and goes limp over his shoulders. The mascot explains that both mind and body are collapsing, making a return to killing intent space impossible. Their only hope is to transfer immediately into another mission world, where the system can repair a host during entry, though the fox-like guide nervously covers her mouth the moment she realizes she disclosed a forbidden secret, then reassures Li and leads him, still carrying Wu, farther down the dimensional tunnel. The next world greets them with green-skinned beastmen calling for the execution of a horned prisoner, an undeveloped orc civilization that the mascot expects Wu to escape with ease. Yet the newly transferred body remains unconscious even after surviving a level 4 cud. Long ago, a technological disaster gave Earth's animals intelligence and humanoid forms, allowing them to overthrow mankind with astonishing speed and reverse centuries of domination. Now humans live throughout beastman society as pets, servants, and objects of amusement. That oppression has driven the survivors into secret resistance groups that assassinate beastman rulers, and Wu's third assignment is to keep their leader, Rakosa, alive. Meanwhile, the horned host wakes in a bed, relieved that the guillotine left his body intact. The mascot agrees with suspicious emphasis that it is intact for the moment, while Wu asks who stopped the blade that had been hanging over his neck. Recovered memories show that the host loved human pets and helped them flee, a betrayal punishable by death. A tiger guard halted the execution under direct command of the Beastman princess, forcing both executioner and confused spectators to submit to royal authority. According to the mascot, the princess spared the prisoner because she liked his face and wanted him brought inside. The bedroom door creaks open and a white-haired cat doctor walks in, syringe in hand, surprised to find Wu awake before the planned operation, and his wary question about the procedure only makes her examine the needle more closely. She explains that any male entering heat must be sterilized before serving the princess safely, but Wu catches the injector against his wrist and threatens her before the sedative can enter, all while the delighted mascot teases him about losing his most treasured male organ. The doctor freezes as Wu turns her own syringe away and prepares to retaliate, calmly declaring that she can undergo the sterilization instead, then flicks the needle past her startled cheek with fiery precision. A cry sounds from somewhere behind the curtain when the tiny projectile finds an unseen target, and an enraged tiger guard immediately crashes into the room with another injector raised. His first blow destroys the bed, though Wu has already sprung beyond its reach. Twin blades flash after him across the wrecked floor, until Wu invokes the second skill of his newly gained apprentice title and traces a luminous circle. Boundless sea of knowledge. Circle Bend turns the tiger's charge and sends its force harmlessly aside. The doctor orders the guard to stop and reveals that he was also the one who prevented Wu's execution, leaving Wu to study the halted blade and reconsider the strange people surrounding this host. Then the tiger drops to one knee as the watching mascot's eyes begin to glow red. He apologizes to the princess for failing to kill the prisoner despite using his full strength, and the inscription on her collar lets Wu identify the supposed doctor as Fox Princess Lillian Stardew. Smiling at his quick deduction, she removes the medical coat and exposes her royal clothes. Wu asks why she saved him only to arrange a second attempt on his life, so Lillian admits that she sensed the aura of an elite killer and wanted to test him as a potential assassin. When he refuses to murder at her command, he sweeps sweeps the blade forward in open defiance. Lillian responds by triggering concealed blades inside his collar, showing Wu that the princess can execute him remotely whenever she chooses. Faced with that threat, he reluctantly asks whose death will buy his survival. Her answer is her own father, Rikosa, the very beastman leader whom Wu's mission requires him to protect. A contradiction that leaves the mascot delighted at the cruelty of his predicament. Disguised as a horned priest, Wu later approaches the king during the Liberation Day ceremony, clutching his robe as he accepts that refusing Lillian would mean instant death. Beneath his ceremonial headdress, his expression hardens with apparent resolve to obey. A guarded stone causeway crosses the bright water to the isolated platform, where two dog soldiers bar Wu's path with crossed weapons. Only then does his party proceed, with Lillian and the tiger guard following behind him. Rikosa lifts both arms and proclaims October 4th the day God granted beastmen a new existence, drawing a roar from the crowd that they now rule the world and will never suffer human abuse again. Then the tiger presents a gagged, red-haired human woman for the disguised priest to sacrifice. Wu's shock gives away that he recognizes the captive, and the tiger immediately questions whether they know each other. The host's memories answer that she was not merely his beloved pet, but his secret lover. Hoping to save her, Wu claims that Liberation Day has never required a human offering. But Lillian argues that mankind began this cruelty and deserves to receive the same treatment, while the tiger makes it clear that the former lover will suffer unless Wu completes the assassination. Without warning, Wu uses his staff to launch an approaching attacker into the air, making the tiger realize that Wu held back during their earlier duel as Lillian cries out about assassins. Then he knocks the princess aside, moving her out of the enemy's path. Panda guards race over the bridge as Lillian rolls nearby, and Wu takes a defensive stance, their armored formation roaring forward in the belief that numbers will overwhelm a lone priest. But his golden staff stops the first panda dead against the breastplate. The attacker looks down to find that the armor has inexplicably disappeared, only for Wu to display it wrapped around his own arm and answer where it went. When the panda demands it back, he agrees with unsettling ease and points the staff ahead. The apprentice's second skill activates and returns the armor while chains coil around its owner. Then 100 cultivation binds every panda into one tightening mass of metal, though more soldiers pour past them, shouting that Rikosa must be protected. Wu answers with 1,000 mace and blows the entire reinforcement squad off the causeway, sending most of them into the water before Rikosa himself charges with twin swords. And a sideways sweep of the golden staff meets the king's attack head-on. Rikosa traps the staff between crossed blades and forces them into a powerful deadlock, accusing Wu of being the assassin sent by the human resistance. But Wu denies their involvement and says the order came from the king's own beastman daughter. He names Lillian Stardew while driving the staff forward through Rikosa's desperate guard, leaving the horrified father to demand why she would want him dead. The answer lies in the conversation Wu held with the princess before the ceremony. Lillian said that human rebels had tried to assassinate Rikosa countless times, failing only because of beastman instincts. But news of their finest killer's arrival convinced her that the next attempt would succeed. From this, Wu understood that she wanted to stage a public death and make further attacks seem pointless. Lillian sadly admitted that the deception was the only way she knew to save her father. And Wu welcomed a plan whose false assassination could fulfill his protection mission perfectly. So in the present battle, he plunges the hidden tip of his staff into Rikosa and alarms the mascot. Wu explains that the retractable blade carries only anesthetic and should leave the king unconscious. Yet the mascot suddenly warns that their performance has become real. Another projectile punches through Rikosa's back, fired by an actual assassin. The wounded king is hurried from the ceremony to the palace infirmary, while Wu credits the host's danger sense and his own killer instincts for noticing the unseen threat. Nevertheless, the doctor reports that Rikosa was pierced through the heart and has little time left. With 48 hours remaining, the system warns that losing his protection target will cost Wu 2 demerits, so he studies the dying king and announces that one possible treatment remains. A claim Lillian ridicules, since even trained doctors failed where this professional killer expects to succeed. Wu replies that Rikosa will die regardless and asks for permission to try, which Lillian grants with the promise to bury him if the attempt fails. Then watches in disbelief as he chains the unconscious patient tightly to the bed. Even the mascot cannot see why a life-saving treatment would require restraints, but Wu says the injury can be healed while the resulting weakness may provoke a frenzy, and activates a copied walker skill that floods Rikosa's body with transforming golden light. Afterward, he invites Lillian back and announces that every wound has closed, though the sounds beyond the doorway make her ask what frightening thing her father has become. Inside, a red-eyed beast strains against the chains and bellows at anyone who approaches. Wu describes the condition as berserking, a state that strengthens beastmen and rapidly regenerates severe injuries, while the mascot recognizes plain cutification and Wu notes how beastman physiology accelerated its healing. Lillian anxiously asks when the snarling king will return to himself. He promises to reverse the state once recovery is complete and draws her outside to discuss what comes next. But the mascot reminds him that maximum cutification is fatal and cannot normally be undone. Wu admits that only Zhang can restore Rikosa, meaning he must find her before the transformation finishes. The guide wonders mischievously whether Zhang might have entered this mission world as well. while Wu warns Lillian that the genuine assassin is still nearby and learns that every suspect has been jailed, then proposes allowing the murder weapon itself to lead them back to its owner. Endless Knowledge identifies it as a paper crane, a foldable killing weapon whose transformation can be learned, and Wu copies return notice from an envelope so the crane will retrace its path. Once animated, it darts through the window with Wu and Lillian following close behind. Their pursuit ends in the palace dungeon, where all suspects from the ceremony sit behind bars, and the crane slips into a cell shared by the tiger guard and Wu's pleading red-haired lover, only to strike the tiger's armor and make him appear responsible for harming Rikosa. He panics, insists that someone framed him, and begs Lillian to remember his loyalty, but Wu seizes the guard and speaks as though the returning weapon has clearly named its owner, before turning and pointing instead at the red-haired woman as the true assassin. She protests that Wu rescued her earlier and that the beastman simply captured her again for sacrifice. While Lillian notes that the crane chose the tiger first, apparently disproving the accusation, Wu counters that its true owner alone could redirect it at the last instant and plant false evidence. The princess refuses to condemn the human woman on a theory and demands something stronger. So Wu explains that Rikosa's attacker emitted no murderous aura, a talent the tiger demonstrably lacks, even as the accused captive begs him not to call her an assassin on such uncertainty. Her performance reminds Wu of another manipulator, Yu Lian, and he attacks Fei Ran with crossing paper blades, inviting Miss Raider to die if she is truly helpless. She catches both weapons before her face and calmly abandons the frightened pet disguise. Revealing herself as the Raider, Fei regrets his interference and chooses the Sentinel as her next target, terms Lillian does not understand, though Wu postpones the explanation until the fight is over, and his mascot warns that every moment spent here leaves Rikosa closer to death. A system notice places the king's cutification at 97% already, while Fei assumes her full Raider form amid orbiting paper weapons and an open book. Then the tiger roars into the swarm, trying to shield Wu and Lillian with his armored body. His charge collides with the crane's, whose edges slice straight through his defenses, because, as Fei boasts, her folded paper is 200 times harder than steel. And soon the circling flock drives the entire group together beneath a killing barrage. Rikosa rises to 98% as Wu finds himself trapped between two disasters, forcing him to raise Golden Pagoda around Lillian and the tiger, where altered laws form a protective barrier, though Fei interprets that defense as proof that his condition has left him weak. Wu answers with 100 refinements and takes control of the same collar mechanism Lillian used to threaten him, charging through the paper storm while Fei watches confidently from behind her book, until she discovers that the execution collar has somehow been transferred around her own neck. Lillian realizes that Wu never truly feared her control and obeys his order to trigger the device, making hidden blades clamp around Fei's throat in what appears to be a decisive defeat. Yet the Raider calmly reveals that the body before them is itself only paper. Wu finally understands why this figurine carried no trace of killing intent, but before Fei can exploit that discovery, an enormous impact throws her against the golden barrier, sending Wu, Lillian, and the tiger tumbling as a new force tears into the confrontation. The system raises Rikosa's cutification to 99%, just as a gigantic clawed hand erupts through the dungeon floor in an explosion of stone, and a bewildered Fei grabs at the limb without understanding who has arrived. Fully transformed, Rikosa bursts from below and lunges at the paper assassin, catches her in one hand, and smashes her brutally into the wall, while Wu can only stare and wonder how the Berserk King found the dungeon. The answer arrives with Zhang Pinger and another mascot, the girl cheerfully saying she follows her teacher everywhere, before identifying Fei as Wu's enemy and ordering the controlled Rikosa to crush her. Pinned against stone, the Raider demands to know who Zhang is and how she commands Cuds. Rikosa replies with a roar and raises his fist, slamming it into Fei hard enough to pulverize the wall around her paper body. The blow sends her through the opening and toward a blue glow beyond the broken masonry. As the king swats away the remains, Fei prepares a different escape, folding herself into a huge paper bird and promising to return with an army, while Rikosa's reading reaches 99.9% and Wu begs Zhang to restore him. Zhang reaches toward the raging beast with complete calm as the final warning flashes, and her control suddenly pulls his cutification back to 50%, then lowers it again to 10, leaving Wu astonished by her precision. Once restored, Rikosa addresses the assembled beastmen from across the water while Wu and Zhang watch, and Wu asks how his student managed to follow him into this separate mission world. She explains that she sensed an artificial cutification and tracked its familiar energy to the prison. Rikosa declares that mankind's age is over and that humans will remain slaves under beastman rule, arguing that their latest assassination attempt can only be answered with retaliation, then orders the death of every human, to the roaring approval of the crowd. Zhang cannot reverse naturally spreading cutification throughout an army, and tells Wu to suppress their murderous impulse. But countless beastmen are already beginning to transform, and failure to prevent war means mission failure. By nightfall, both sides are making final preparations for the clash. In the forest camp, Faye lays out a map of Rakosa's guarded tent and plans the human army's nighttime strike, marking Wu's awakened priest as their greatest obstacle and assuming he will remain beside the king, an assumption their commander, Geng Ren, quietly suggests is wrong. Geng reveals that the dangerous priest is nowhere near Rakosa's position because Wu has walked into the human command camp and casually greeted Faye before the attack. When she demands to know how he found them, he unveils a cage holding her captured paper cranes. Faye recognizes them at once and angrily asks why one ever came into his possession, so Wu reveals the destination letter he secretly slipped inside. Knowing the crane would eventually return home, after attaching return notice, all he had to do was follow it directly to her. Delighted by the prospect of another fight, Faye opens her book and attacks before marching on Rakosa, while Geng notes that Wu came alone and surely did not arrive merely to surrender his own head. Wu agrees that he offers them a head, then clarifies with a smile that it will not be his. Instead, he exposes the escape route from Rakosa's bedroom and advises an ambush after the king returns, though Geng questions the delay when Rakosa plans to lead the next day's assault on the human city. Wu calls a direct battle hopeless and urges him to evacuate every civilian first. Geng suspects a beastman trap, but Wu points out that Rakosa needs no trickery to destroy humanity, and the commander ultimately lets him leave, reasoning that any betrayal would only expose the ambush and cost the king his life. Afterward, the mascot asks whether this plan deliberately abandons Wu's protection target. Wu says Rakosa's fate no longer matters once the remaining 19 hours expire, adding that he has already secured the one item capable of ending the war. And by daylight, an immense beastman army stands before the sealed gates of the human city. Wu wonders why such an advanced civilization now relies on cold weapons rather than firearms. So Rakosa explains that stronger beastmen destroyed modern technology after their victory to keep humans from turning it against them, then calls up to the walls and offers to spare anyone who surrenders at once. No answer comes from the silent battlements as the troops wait below, prompting Rakosa to order the archers to loose their opening volley. A dense cloud of arrows rises over the walls and rains into the city. When surrender still does not follow, the king sends his strongest warriors to break the main gate, but a sudden explosive counterstrike tears through the charging formation before it can arrive, and armored rhinoceroses tumble across the field, crushed by a weapon no beastman expected. Rakosa sends winged scouts over the walls to expose the hidden defenders, but after searching every rooftop and street, they report that not a single human remains. The successful evacuation leaves the king baffled and furious about where the entire population went. The mascot celebrates Wu's strategy, though he is already sensing an extraordinarily powerful intent to kill, and soon Rakosa's whole army looks up at the ominous shadows spreading overhead. Human soldiers are descending on giant paper cranes, taking the exposed beastmen completely by surprise. The airborne formation dives amid beating paper wings and a storm of projectiles, its first arrows tearing through soldiers who have no time to respond, before winged beastmen archers rise and unleash a furious counter-volley. Nearby cutification readings exceed 90%, proof that Faye designed the ambush to keep both races fighting. And after hearing that Raider and Sentinel are opposing roles, Wu realizes Zhang is the only one who can interfere, so he fires a brilliant signal flare over the battlefield to summon her. Human archers maintain their pressure while enemy arrows streak around their fragile paper mounts, until Faye opens her book and unfolds a colossal barrier in front of the riders. The broad paper shield catches volley after volley without slowing the formation. Through changing openings in that barrier, the humans take aim at the winged defenders, while its enormous marked sections rearrange and redirect the contest across the sky. Then a coordinated shot pierces several scouts and sends them tumbling earthward. Larger troops collapse under the continuing bombardment as paper riders descend behind their lines, leaving scattered beastmen struggling amid the growing casualties. And Geng, impressed by Faye's power, decides that Rakosa can be killed right here. Faye welcomes that outcome because the king's death would maximize beastman hatred and create a flood of cuds, while Lillian sees that the airborne archers prevent any ground soldier from reaching her father, and orders a mole beastman to tunnel beneath the barrage and pull him out. Wu warns that no tunnel can be finished before the next rain of arrows lands, and a tearful Lillian admits she has no other way to save Rakosa, prompting him to offer one possibility, though he makes clear that it is exceptionally dangerous. The princess accepts any risk over standing by and watching her father die, so Wu chooses to unleash his berserker friend and trusts Jiang's Kud form to overturn the entire battle, just as Geng raises a hand to issue the hovering archers another command. His order dissolves into shouts as paper-mounted fighters suddenly struggle to break free, as Jiang's transformed figure storms onto the battlefield in red armor and fills the human commander with fear. Faye immediately calls the riders after her to rescue Ging from the chaos. Watching Zhang tear through the formation with ease, Lillian marvels at the berserker's strength, but then remembers Wu's warning and asks what danger the transformation brings. He reluctantly explains that once Zhang loses control, she can no longer distinguish friend from foe. Her sweeping tail proves it by striking toward Rakosa and Geng alike, smashing the two enemy leaders violently into one another, as Lillian races to her father's side and Zhang continues attacking both armies. Before the battle, Zhang had questioned why Wu wanted her to attack the man he was assigned to protect, and he explained that Rikosa would never be safe while centuries of hatred kept human assassins coming. The quickest path to peace was therefore a common enemy too powerful for either race to defeat alone. Zhang admiringly assumed that Wu intended to become that villain and carry both people's hatred, until the astonished mascot interrupted and told her she had misunderstood everything, because Wu bluntly meant for Zhang herself to fill that role. She panicked at the thought of fighting humanity and beastmen at once, but Wu said she only felt inadequate because she had never seen the strength of her own cud form, and the mascot confirmed that her lack of killing restrictions meant the transformation would not affect their score. Wu swatted the protesting guide away and told the childlike system not to interrupt adults, then asked whether Zhang would willingly become the villain who united two species, a burden she accepts in the present as she confronts Rikosa in her transformed body. Beastmen rally around their king while airborne humans rush to defend Gang Ren, and both armies abandon their own battle to converge on Jiang with cries for her death. She begins by kicking one heavy beastman aside and effortlessly knocking away his weapon. A turtle warrior spins his shell through the crowd to join the assault, while a leaping porcupine receives Jiang's fist squarely in the torso, and her continuing counters knock paper-mounted humans from the sky all around her. One enormous impact finally drives Jiang into a shattered crater, where she grimaces as a dark, crawling mass closes around the debris. Countless rats pour over her armored body and try to hold the shared enemy down. The mascot jet that Jiang's incomplete cud will die without support, only for Wu to ask whether the guide has ever played with a spinning top, a question it finds infuriatingly frivolous while his student remains in mortal danger. Wu activates Whipping Horse, a walker skill that increases a struck object's speed 100-fold, and cracks its lash across the trapped Zhang to send her into a violent spin. Her rotating body becomes a blur of repeated blows inside the rat swarm. The accelerated motion erupts from the crater and throws rats and rubble high into the air, freeing Zhang to charge Rikosa and Gang again at full speed, her body lowered as she fixes both leaders with renewed murderous purpose. A huge octopus beastman blocks her route with his head and spreading tentacles, then floods the path with a dense cloud of black ink. Blinded and struck by projectiles, Zhang is quickly surrounded by another wave of warriors. Wu extends a fine guiding thread and searches the fallen for a useful skill, until Endless Knowledge detects the echolocation of an injured bat beastman, and Walker's introduction board temporarily passes that newly copied ability to Zhang. Concentric sound waves spread from her and map every attacker through the ink, letting her evade converging weapons and counter each hidden beastman accurately, though an airborne human still launches a ring-shaped blade from above. It cuts through Zhang's armored shoulder and tears off her arm in a burst of blood, so Whoops copies a gecko's regeneration and immediately teaches that trait to her. Within moments, the missing hand grows back and restores her ability to fight. Humans and beastmen are closing from every direction when Zhang prepares to strike again, but they pile onto her together and briefly bury the cud beneath their combined assault, until Wu borrows a pufferfish's explosive response and blasts every attacker away. Rikosa and Gang watch anxiously, unable to imagine how such a monster can be defeated, while Lillian reminds Wu that Zhang is his friend and begs him to end the rampage. He insists that victory is possible only if humans and beastmen work as one. The rival commanders exchange a wary look and recognize the same necessity, then clasp hands in a temporary truce made for the survival of both peoples, and order their soldiers to stop fighting one another and concentrate entirely on Zhang. Rikosa and Zhang jointly direct everyone against the common monster, postponing their own war, which earns Wu the mascot's congratulations for finally uniting the two armies. But Fei sees their cutification still above 80% and mourns the mass transformation slipping away. As Jiang scatters their forces, the raider wonders why an unexpected cud ruined her design, before linking the monster to the companion previously seen beside Wu and realizing its arrival was engineered. With only 30 minutes left, she vows not to let her mission end in failure. Fei uses her book to distort the renewed fighting and quietly redirects a human sword, making its startled owner stab a reptilian beastman instead of Jiang. The bleeding victim collapses while everyone nearby stares at what appears to be a betrayal. Outraged beastmen denounce the backstab and attack before anyone can expose Fei's trick, ignoring the horrified human's claim that his victim moved into the blade, and charging with cries that every member of mankind must die. Human troops retaliate at once, rekindling the species war in a single moment, while cutification races to 99.9% and even Wu's mascot marvels at Fei's ruthlessness. Surrounded by nearly complete transformations, the raider confidently claims victory. Then multiple readings plunge without warning from the brink of completion to 50%, a collapse Fei cannot understand after restoring so much murderous hatred, until a shaken human asks whether Zhang ever truly intended to kill everyone there. He wonders why a wounded beastman saved him if their races are irreconcilable enemies, and receives the answer that, while fighting side by side, the beastmen instinctively began to see him as a comrade, proof that humans and beastmen can recognize one another that way. Zhang dives at a fallen polar bear and keeps threatening both sides, ripping into the animal until blood stains its white fur, only for a human warrior to throw himself between them and receive the next devastating wound. The astonished bear catches the bleeding man and asks why he intervened, and the dying fighter rejects the idea that one life is worth less than another. He saved the beastman because human and beastman lives matter equally. When Zhang strikes again, the polar bear hurls his wounded comrade clear and repays that protection, While across the field, both species begin shielding one another as they resist the monster. A change Faye cannot comprehend after so much hatred. With barely 5 minutes remaining, she abandons the question and rushes to assassinate Rikosa herself, sending paper blades directly at the king and gang, but the human commander intercepts her and demands whether she has forgotten their purpose. Faye slips around his sword and insists that her goal has never changed, openly declaring that her mission is Rikosa's death as she prepares the decisive attack. And Lillian screams when the strike seems certain to reach her father. At the last instant, Faye notices her own paper responding to someone else as a broad folded sheet appears across Rikosa's chest and catches the blow. Above them, Wu descends on copied paper wings and reveals that the shield belongs to him. The astonished raider demands to know when he stole her signature technique, so Wu explains that the previous night's negotiation was cover for his attempt to copy it, because Faye's own power was the crucial tool he needed to bring the war to an end. She answers with another storm of folded blades and mocks the idea that a copy can beat its original, while Wu raises enormous paper panels around himself and arranges a more intricate trap, admitting that her power alone would not be enough without Zhang's part in the plan. From below, Zhang launches a charging bull beastman straight into Faye's flight path, and the massive body explodes against her into fluttering scraps, which reveal to the raider that the supposedly living warrior was only a paper doll. She realizes every heroic rescue between humans and beastmen was staged with Wu's copied figures, but his confirmation comes with the news that her raider countdown has already expired, and the failed mission begins dragging a furious Faye out of the world. As her body breaks into paper, she promises to cut Wu apart at their next meeting, while her airborne mounts dissolve and drop their startled riders from the sky, and Zhang is taken by a red extraction beam amid the slowly rising survivors. Humans and beastmen celebrate together now that the terrifying common enemy has vanished, yet moments later, suspicion returns and both sides point weapons at one another, exactly the outcome Zhang remembers Wu predicting. Earlier, she asked whether their temporary allies would resume the war after she disappeared, worrying that nothing could keep the peace once the shared danger was gone. But Wu merely patted her head and assured her that the rest had been handled. The two armies now face each other in tense silence beneath the memory of their fear, until Rikosa orders every beastman to turn around and return home, leaving Lillian to ask why he will not use this moment to eliminate mankind. Her father says they still need the humans because the common monster may return, before the story shifts to an ambulance speeding toward a hospital at night, carrying Wu into another disaster. He wakes in the body of a black-haired patient who is bleeding heavily while the mascot mocks his latest bad luck. A masked vampire surgeon promises to stop the hemorrhage inside the ambulance, then bares his fangs and jokes that removing every drop of blood would certainly solve it, much to the guide's amusement as he opens his mouth with a howl. Wu turns endless knowledge on a steel restraint tube and learns to harden his body like metal, causing the vampire's bite to meet skin too tough for his fangs, and the recoiling surgeon anxiously asks whether his patient is secretly a mage. Sitting upright, Wu concludes that the new transfer has placed him in a fantasy world inhabited by vampires, though the mascot calls the assignment unusually strange and urges him to examine its conditions. Two allies must locate the creator of the Cuds and stop one unspecified opponent. Wu notes that this 2-against-1 structure appears more favorable than their earlier balanced missions, but the guide warns that extra numbers mean the system considers their side gravely weaker and is compensating, a judgment Wu initially blames on his critically wounded host. The mascot agrees and tells him to find his teammate before facing the lone raider, while the ambulance surgeon dismisses Wu's system conversation as delirium from blood loss, an insult that earns him a fistful of collar and an immediate demand for answers. Wu asks why a vampire works in an ambulance and feeds on defenseless patients, and learns that his kind must hide because hunters and natural enemies roam outside, just as ominous howls rise around the hospital under the full moon. The terrified surgeon identifies them as werewolves, precisely the enemies he feared, then confirms another familiar rule. Human blood rapidly heals vampires, which leads Wu to offer mercy if the surgeon will transform him into one as well. After a frightened pause, the vampire accepts, and Wu promises to stop resisting, allowing the fangs into his neck to begin the requested infection, while hooded figures outside the hospital watch the ambulance from the shadows. Despite the completed bite, Wu's original wound refuses to close, because the surgeon explains a fledgling must first drink human blood to awaken its regeneration, so Wu immediately asks whether the ambulance driver is an ordinary person. The panicked answer is that the driver is another vampire and therefore useless as a meal, prompting Wu to order a stop near a chaotic district where humans can be found. Beneath the full moon, he enters a deserted alley in search of blood and possible enemies. A mugger with a hidden knife mistakes the injured stranger for easy prey and follows, then demands his money and threatens him into silence, only for Wu to steal the robber's wallet first, call them colleagues, and request some peace. Confused by the reversal, the mugger asks whether Wu is also a thief, and Wu agrees that he has come to take something, though it is not money. His new fangs emerge as he names fresh blood as the real prize. Draining the mugger restores him and finally makes the mascot understand why he chose vampirism, though the guide warns that the scent-healing Wu will also draw his new species' natural enemies. And a hulking werewolf is already silhouetted on a rooftop against the moon. The creature roars, leaps down, and charges directly toward the alley, while Wu calmly welcomes it and takes the knife from beside the unconscious mugger, then launches upward with the stolen blade before the werewolf can land. A massive fist meets his attack head-on and drives through his guard, leaving Wu to endure the close-range collision as enormous jaws snap toward him. He catches them on a steel-hardened forearm and turns the creature's momentum aside. Using that force, Wu flips the werewolf overhead and crashes it into the pavement, earning praise from the mascot for hardening his arm in time to prevent the bite, though he reveals scratches where the fangs penetrated even the reinforced skin. Wolfsbane poison will spread the moment his concentration can no longer maintain the hardening, so Wu raises the knife to kill the pinned enemy before his strength fails, only to be stopped by a tiger mascot, identifying the werewolf as his assigned teammate Chin Cola. The system confirms that the blue team is assembled now that the pair have met, and Wu angrily asks why his supposed ally attacked without recognizing him, while his mascot confronts Chin's guide over one sentinel assaulting another. The tiger explains that a mysterious witch hypnotized Chin into believing he belonged to the raiders, and Wu enters his mind through Mind's Arc to inspect the implanted command. Inside the memory, a beautiful woman in black approaches Chin's ordinary human form beneath flowering branches. The young man looks up from his drink and is captivated before she says a word, spilling it as a single flirtatious glance fills his thoughts with hearts, and declaring love at first sight while the stranger walks casually away. Chin's mascot bats aside an insect and mocks its host for looking ridiculous, explaining that the presumed raider placed him under hypnosis with nothing more than that glance, until Chin reveals his level 3 yin-yang envoy title and traps Wu with Birion to ground. Wu knows that dodging this attack inside the mind is impossible despite his mascot's warning, as dark veins spread from the bitten arm and show the wolfsbane entering his circulation. Soon he is coughing blood while the poison rapidly consumes the borrowed body. Even weakened, Wu tears free from Birion to ground and shatters the surrounding pavement, then asks what penalty the system imposes for killing a teammate, alerting the mascot to his achiever skills. While Chin's guide desperately reminds him that the poisoned werewolf is supposed to be an ally, Wu raises the knife and demands a direct answer before another attack arrives. And once told that the only cost is losing Chin's help, he abandons all restraint. Achiever's eye expands his awareness across a kilometer and exposes the incoming charge. Orange power ignites around the knife as Wu invokes the title's second ability, Achiever's Hand, which sends his hands anywhere within that range and places the blade at Chin's throat, prompting the terrified tiger mascot to beg its host to wait before the precise strike kills him. The teleported knife bites into the charging werewolf's neck and draws a roar, black blood leaking around the wound while orange energy burns along the embedded blade. Then Chin staggers away and the poisoned Wu remains among the shattered stones. A sudden retaliation launches Wu high over the crater, and as he closes on the fallen teammate, both mascots warn that killing Chin will make victory nearly impossible. But Wu first demands an explanation for the cutification seemingly caused by the werewolf. Chin's guide insists that the hypnotized sentinel never transformed anyone deliberately, while Wu points out that the system warnings began immediately after he heard Chin howl. Cornered by vampires, his teammate had transformed and unintentionally cutified them with that cry instead of escaping. Wu asks whether the witch also appeared during Chin's encounter with the vampires, then uses Mind's Arc to revisit the memory of their circle closing around the fallen werewolf. Chin had transformed and faced the vampire leader before the entire pack. The leader called for unity because the werewolf threatened every vampire as common prey, while Chin lifted his head and released the howl that captured all their attention. Their eyes darkened to red and black before cutification drove them to attack him together. Back in the alley, Chin's mascot asks whether Wu found the cause, and he says the same detail appeared during both the hypnosis and the mass transformation. Worker bees are hovering all around them even here. One lands on the unconscious mugger and stings his neck, instantly raising his cutification to 60% according to the system, and the awakening man growls as violent intent floods both mind and body. With Chin still recovering behind him, the transformed mugger grabs a stone and attacks Wu's back, but Wu turns at once and throws the stolen knife, which the newly strengthened attacker catches barehanded in mid-spin. A sweeping kick then launches the cutified man down the alley, while Wu draws one suspicious bee into reach on a red energy tether. Endless knowledge reveals that these insects collect murderous intent and inject it with their sting. The bees therefore transformed both Chin's vampire attackers and the mugger, a conclusion considers while kneeling beside the subdued victim, though Chin's mascot wonders whom he is addressing when neither guide can see anyone else. Wu warns that invisible listeners can still be present, and a black-clad witch finally drops her concealment to ask how he detected her. He explains that nectar-gathering bees have no reason to linger in an alley without flowers unless their master is near. That suspicion led him to examine the whole kilometer around them through Achiever's eye, whose scan exposed an anomalous presence hidden among the swarm. And now Wu demands why she set cutified vampires on Chin after already hypnotizing him. The witch says the fight merely tested whether Chin was strong enough to oppose Wu, and with the teammate apparently eliminated, she expects a quick victory followed by a pleasant sunbath, especially since one enemy lies badly wounded and the other's werewolf poison has disabled his healing. Hiding the knife behind him, Wu teases that he would like to watch her sunbathe, then reminds her that it is still night as Achiever's hand launches a surprise strike. But she catches the teleported wrist and reveals that her host commands 3 formidable spells. The first turns night into dazzling daylight beneath an artificial sun, whose rays burn Wu's vampire flesh and disintegrate the distant hand holding his knife, while the smiling witch names the spell Illusory Day. Smoke rises from Wu as he crouches helplessly beneath the false sun, yet through the pain he begins to say that werewolves are not afraid of something, and she steps closer, mockingly asking him to finish the sentence. Suspecting he wants to distract her for Chin's ambush, the witch says the trick will not work, but Wu finally completes the warning. Werewolves do not fear sunlight, a fact she repeats skeptically without noticing the danger behind her. Chin looked unconscious and mortally wounded, so she sees no possible rescue coming until a huge silhouette rises at her back under the artificial daylight, and the awakened werewolf catches her from behind against his massive chest. The witch demands to know how Chin recovered so suddenly, invokes her authority as his master, and orders him to release her. But Illusory Day fades to moonlight while she realizes that the hypnosis no longer holds. Wu reveals that he broke the conditioning well before pretending to kill his teammate, having guessed from Chin's memory that the spell depended on a physical trigger, namely the worker bee that stung him at the exact moment he became enthralled. Achiever's eye confirmed the foreign object inside Chin during their fight, and the same scan located the concealed raider who commanded the insects nearby, so Wu made his teleported knife look as though it had delivered a lethal wound. In truth, the blade removed the buried stinger and returned Chin's mind to him, leaving the cornered witch to ask how the pair coordinated without her noticing. Wu reminds her that teammates share a private channel and approaches with his knife ready. Suddenly, she calls him teacher and complains that he keeps hurting his adorable students, making Wu think of Jiang for an instant before denying that this woman could be his pupil. While the witch recognizes his tone and wonders whether her favorite toy entered the mission too, her mannerisms finally lead Wu to demand whether she is Yu Lian, and the system confirms both that personality tag and her title, Queen Bee, revealing the raider as an innate host from their own original world. New warnings interrupt the reunion as several nearby people reach 50% cutification, prompting Wu to accuse Yu Lian of starting another outbreak, which she freely admits is her mission objective as the readings race toward 90. Chin keeps her restrained while Wu wonders why the affected people are coming toward them, until a terrified crowd pours down the alley in flight from something else, and among them Wu recognizes the vampire surgeon from the ambulance. The man screams for everyone to run from the monster pursuing them, though Chin's guide cannot understand why nearly complete cuds flee rather than attack fearlessly, so Wu asks whether their hunter is a vampire or a werewolf. The surgeon rejects both answers and looks desperately to the sky, identifying the descending woman as a hunter who specializes in exterminating supernatural beings. Then her enormous blade sweeps through the clustered fugitives. Every victim touched by the strike reaches 100% cutification, and each completed cud is immediately declared eradicated by the system, explaining why 2 sentinels were assigned against a single objective of such extraordinary strength. Wu cautiously faces the blue-haired swordswoman and demands her name, while she rests the great blade on one shoulder and introduces herself as the Silver Hunter. Feng Ruyu is the actual name he gives a moment later. Enchanted by Feng's appearance, Chin drools and says he would gladly die to such a beautiful woman, only to learn from the offended hunter that Feng is male, a revelation that shatters Chin's romantic fantasy and sends him recoiling in horror. Feng draws the gleaming weapon and threatens to castrate the lecher later, then points it at Wu and prepares another supernatural execution, first slicing his own wrist to display the silver blood of his family. That blood, Feng explains, restores the healing of vampires poisoned by werewolf bites, though Yu Lian impatiently orders him to stop talking and finish their enemies. He ignores her urgency, admires the moon, and extends the glowing blade. Feng says he intends to turn everyone there into the most beautiful corpses possible, while Wu privately tells Chin to coordinate through their teammate channel, then sets another teleported hand ablaze and begins their joint offensive. Yu Lian warns that Wu can make the hand strike from anywhere in range, but Feng abruptly swings his sword at her instead, making the witch question his sanity, just as Wu's fiery hand materializes beside her. Feng's blade pierces Yu Lian despite that nearby threat and doubles her over, while Chin casts Berry into ground beneath both opponents and collapses the pavement into a crater. Yet Feng erupts from the rubble at once, too powerful for the restraint to contain. His blade cuts through Wu's flying hand, then slams into the crater as he commands the buried pair to sink farther. Silver Cyclone answering with blood-edged weapons that converge on Wu and Chin from every side. Wu clutches the ruined arm and calls out as the spinning blades close, but several strike Chin's werewolf limbs and torso simultaneously, leaving the battered creature silent and rapidly weakening beneath the barrage. Unable to hold the transformation, Chin collapses into his chubby human host, and Wu's mascot tells him to retreat from an enemy who completely outclasses them. So Wu runs, provoking Chin's guide to accuse him of deserting a teammate. Exhausted, Chin tells the protesting mascot to be quiet as Wu disappears, only for a burning teleported hand to grab him from behind when another blade arrives, catching Feng's sword just short of his shoulder and preventing a fatal blow. After the remote rescue, Wu stops and turns back toward the hunter across the alley, while Yu Lian orders Feng to kill him and another sword whirls into motion, a strike Qin believes must finally end Wu's resistance. Even the witch looks surprised when Feng pauses rather than finish the target, draws the blade over his own palm and opens another wound, then holds it above Wu's mouth so drops of silver blood fall inside. The smoke dies this way as healing returns and repairs the badly burned vampire body, leaving Wu to ask why an enemy saved him, while a blushing Feng privately recognizes him as teacher. Wu joyfully realizes that Zhang Pinger is inside Feng Ruyu and asks how it happened, and she says her consciousness awakened within the hunter, seizing control when Wu was threatened, before Yu Lian greets her favorite toy from nearby. Zhang does not recognize the speaker until Wu bluntly names the witch, then grips her teacher's hand and offers to hold Yu Lian back during their escape, taking Feng's sword and rushing into close combat with the queen bee. Her first slash crosses Yu Lian's torso and forces the witch backward, hurling her over the broken pavement as Zhang continues to advance. But the next swing is blocked and Yu Lian's eyes begin to shine blue. With a playful goodnight, the witch casts another spell through direct eye contact, filling Zhang's green eyes with a supernatural drowsiness too strong for the borrowed body. She yawns and collapses toward the pavement in forced sleep. Yu Lian stands over Feng's unconscious form after suppressing Zhang's controlling soul, and ends the immediate struggle with a confident snap of her fingers. Moments later, Feng's original consciousness wakes in confusion inside the body again. The queen bee says a witch had inserted another soul, which illusory pupil has temporarily put to sleep, then tells Feng that Wu and Qin escaped, but extending the hunt will be far more entertaining. Later, inside a hospital room, an embarrassed Qin confesses a disturbing consequence of the fight. He wails that he has become a eunuch, a missing part the mascots find easy to dismiss, while Wu reminds him that only this temporary host was injured and his original body remains whole, though Qin is more seriously worried that neither sentinel can defeat Feng Ruyo. Wu says they do not need to kill the hunter, leading Qin to expect an attempt at recruitment, but they know far too little about Feng to understand what could change his mind. Until a small paper crane enters the hospital, and Wu announces that the needed intelligence has arrived. It lands beside him and unfolds into a secret message, whose source Wu provocatively identifies as Feng himself, because Jiang used her time inside the hunter to gather information without his knowledge. Wu confirms that this access served exactly the purpose he intended, having asked Jiang before their escape to discover the root of Feng's hatred for vampires and werewolves. Her note says those creatures killed his father and created the obsession. Night later settles over an overgrown cemetery of bare trees and weathered graves, where Wu and the recovering Qin arrive carrying shovels for an unexplained task, and find the grave of Feng Ruoyun, the silver hunter's dead father. They dig up the coffin noisily beneath the moon, Qin reluctantly working in the grave while Wu watches from its edge, until the lid exposes a clothed skeleton resting under the crumbling soil. Wu tells Qin to remove the bones now that the excavation is finished, but his teammate indignantly insists that Wu alone is responsible for desecrating the grave supported by the mascot, before the guide abruptly warns that someone is standing above them. Looking up, Wu finds two figures at the rim, masked Feng Ruoyu and Yu Lian, and the enraged hunter demands to know why strangers are touching his father's remains, while a nervous Qin claims he only wanted to confirm that an adult skeleton has 206 bones. Ignoring the excuse, Wu asks how their enemies tracked them to this cemetery, though the smiling witch refuses to reveal her method until some future occasion, and Qin fears Feng will bury them in the same grave for what they have done. Wu orders him to follow the plan, opens a book, and promises to delay the hunter, launching a flock of paper cranes while Qin prepares their concealed countermeasure. As Yu Lian watches from safety and casually asks whether Feng wants help, he swings the great blade and tells her only to pray that their enemies survive, then drives Wu back into the open coffin with nothing but the defensive book, whose reinforced pages tear as they hold against a crushing downward thrust. Wu admits that he cannot restrain Feng much longer and shouts for Qin to hurry, while Qin gathers strength and makes the borrowed human body swell dramatically, then casts Dead Revitalization, wrapping Ruoyun's remains in dense supernatural smoke. To his shock, the hunter's father left behind the unmistakable skeleton of a werewolf, which sits upright in the coffin beneath a violet aura, though Wu tells him to ignore the mystery and proceed at once. Feng pauses to ask suspiciously what that next step could be, as Qin uses soul transfer and draws the awakened spirit out of the bones, receiving Ruoyun into his motionless host while Wu continues blocking the sword. The hunter lunges to stab Qin before the transfer stabilizes, but Qin warns that his father's soul now inhabits this body and will scatter if it dies. A result Wu's mascot celebrates even as Qin's own guide bleakly declares failure. Ruoyun's first response to his son is strangely hostile, cutifying Qin's body and seizing Feng's face with violent claws, leaving the tiger mascot unable to understand why their reunion resembles a battle between enemies. Calling him Yuer, Ruoyun demands an explanation for what happened 3 years before, while Feng coldly says he did nothing beyond following his father's lessons, and the memory returns to Ruoyun praising his son for exterminating the ancient blood wolf's descendants. Proud of the accomplishment, the father said their family could finally retire from hunting, after Feng surveyed the bodies of the vampires and werewolves he had apparently destroyed, then urged the young man to enjoy an ordinary life from that point onward. Feng answered only with tears, deeply affected by the long-awaited approval. But sometime later, Ruoyun secretly entered the ancestral hall with a flashlight and discovered something inside the darkness that horrified him. His son stood beside a strange wooden enclosure holding a heavy chain, calmly asking why his father had come to the hall at such an hour. Royun explained that exterminated monsters were reappearing, leading him to inspect the sealed blood wolf. What the investigation exposed was worse than anything he imagined, because Feng had been using the chained creature to manufacture new vampires and werewolves, all in the name of the childhood lesson that hunters exist to kill them. Without monsters, Feng argued, hunters would have no purpose at all, as the blood wolf threw aside another newly infected human before Royun's horrified eyes, and the father offered forgiveness if his son would end this vicious cycle immediately. Feng refused because a life without that purpose felt unbearable and demanded no further interference, prompting Royun to ask whether he would murder his own father for opposing him. But the son carefully replied that his teachings forbade killing humans. Instead, Feng released the chained blood wolf and sent it at his defenseless father, while the creature itself questioned whether this violated the hunter's code. And Feng answered that a transformed Ruoyun would no longer count as human. His father became a werewolf and raised a sword in their fatal confrontation, a truth Yu Lian now asks Feng to face back in the cemetery, while assuring him that she, at least, has supported his side from the beginning. Royun denounces the unfilial son and charges to remove this disgrace from the family. As Wu sends a burning achiever's hand through Feng's path, the spectral limb passes through the hunter's upper body and leaves a luminous wound. Cutified Royun catches Feng from behind before he can recover, but the trapped hunter drives his sword backward through Qin's borrowed body, and even impaled, the father refuses to release him. A glowing triangular fragment remains lodged in Feng's chest from Wu's intervention, while a black puncture opens through Qin's back as the hunter fights the restraint, insisting that obedience to Ruoyun's teachings means completing his mission despite their blood relation. Every monster must die, Feng declares as he pushes the weapon through the borrowed body, until Wu's two blazing remote hands catch the sword and stop the finishing strike, giving Royun the chance to sink fangs into his son's neck. Feng boasts that even a stronger bite is useless when silver blood heals him instantly, but Royun's cutified eyes flare as murderous resolve overwhelms Qin's host, and the body becomes a towering werewolf whose jaws close deep around the hunter's throat. The mascot believes Qin's cut-enhanced strength may finally be enough to kill Feng, who drops to all fours with blood spurting from a wound far more serious than expected, while Wu smiles and announces that the plan has worked. Then Ruoyun's blue spirit rises from Qin's startled body and begins to dissolve, leaving the hunter kneeling as Qin regains control, and both guides wonder what happened, until they realize Yu Lian destroyed the bones, dispersing the soul and ending his cutification. A weakened Feng touches the bite while poison burns through his neck, and Wu immediately grabs werewolf Qin by the arm and orders a retreat from the cemetery. Though Yu Lian watches calmly and tells them escape is impossible, she calls after Wu to ask whether he still wonders who exposed their location, but when he turns for the answer, Qin tackles him violently to the ground, and looms over his startled teammate before admitting that he was the one who betrayed them. Pinned beneath the werewolf, Wu asks how Yu Lian can still control Qin after the stinger was removed, and she explains that he broke only the outermost layer of a carefully nested enchantment. Deeper hypnosis still leaves Qin infatuated, obedient, and convinced that the witch is irresistible. Wu smiles at the nightmare a clever student can become for any teacher, while Yu Lian orders Qin to crush his skull beneath one enormous paw, and the hypnotized werewolf raises his foot over Wu's exposed face. Qin strains with vicious delight as his master's command nears completion, but two burning achiever's hands appear beneath the paw and stop its descent, then turn the force back and throw the laughing beast away. Wu springs over the grave toward the weakened, ducks beneath the hunter's warning sword swing, and insists that his approach is not the suicidal attack Feng assumes. A fiery hand shoves the confused hunter directly against Wu, revealing the real plan when the vampire kisses him without warning, much to Qin's embarrassed shock and Yu Lian's fury. At her command, the werewolf launches toward the pair with claws extended, but Feng, still holding Wu close, swings backward at the airborne attacker, cutting across Qin's arm and knocking him aside. The beast retreats to Yu Lian while Feng remains protectively beside Wu, leaving the witch to demand whether the silver hunter has lost his mind, before Zhang Pinger confirms that the kiss awakened her consciousness inside him. The baffled mascot asks how Wu could know such a strange remedy would work, and he admits that he merely repeated the kiss that once awakened Jiang from cutification, prompting the guide to suggest the same treatment for Qin's deeper hypnosis. Wu studies the crouching wolf and considers the unpleasant possibility in silence, briefly imagining a romantic kiss against that enormous muzzle, before declaring that even saving a teammate cannot justify so great a sacrifice. Feng may be male, he adds, but at least the hunter resembles a beautiful woman, while Yulian interrupts the discussion by ordering Qin against his teacher again, and surrounds them with bees that can force Feng's original mind back to the surface. Wu warns Yang not to let a single insect touch her, but she confidently raises the hunter's sword and tells him not to worry, because Feng's body is the strongest one available. Broad intersecting arcs cut every approaching worker bee from the air, and once the swarm is gone, Zhang charges the witch with a promise that she is next, though Yu Lian calmly insists that her toy cannot kill her. The blade stops against the queen bee's throat instead of completing the cut, and Zhang strains in confusion as Feng's powerful body refuses to obey, while the witch smiles beneath her hat at the trembling resistance. Yu Lian takes Zhang by the chin and calls her a toy naturally made to submit, until a tiny puncture on Feng's neck explains the sudden paralysis. An invisible bee slipped through the sword defense and stung the exposed skin. Qin points after the retreating vampire and tells his master that Wu escaped, bringing Zhang a relieved smile despite the witch standing directly behind her. Then Yu Lian embraces the disobedient toy and promises punishment for protecting teacher. She grips Yang's sword hand and begins planting a new personal order, one that will make the girl kill Wu herself at their next meeting. While later that night, a brightly lit gathering fills a towering Gothic building. A muscular doorman stops Wu at the entrance and asks for an invitation, but exposed fangs provide sufficient proof of membership, and he enters a hall where elegantly dressed vampires mingle under colored lights. Wealthy patrons dance, flirt, and drink around the crowded nightclub's central bar, where Wu settles in front of a full cup of fresh blood, praising its quality while the mascot complains that Qin now serves their enemy. Wu says that betrayal is precisely why he has come to seek help here, and asks the bartender for a newspaper whose cover features Guardian Feng Royu, a name that immediately fills every vampire in the club with terror. They scream that the Silver Hunter has arrived and stampede for the exits, until the bartender clarifies that Wu requested only a newspaper about him, though the mascot doubts such frightened creatures could ever fight beside them. Smiling over his drink, Wu says their willingness remains to be seen, just as a bloodied vampire rushes inside and announces a dangerous arrival, and the bartender once again waves Feng's newspaper in an attempt to calm everyone. The messenger struggles to explain that this time the attacker is not Feng, before a gigantic werewolf crashes into the club and sends a waitress skidding across the floor, then rampages among the helpless patrons, scattering them in every direction. Wu's guide urges retreat before another bite destroys his chance against the hunter, yet he calmly folds the newspaper into a sharp weapon while appearing to consider escape, and asks who would protect all these wounded vampires if he left. The werewolf lunges while the mascot wonders when Wu became a saint, and the folded paper hardens into a gleaming blade ready for battle, allowing him to leap over Qin's snapping jaws and prepare a downward counter. The beast curls defensively and swings a huge arm against Wu's twin paper weapons, though one narrow blade catches the charging paw without giving ground. Then two burning achiever's hands appear around Qin's head and wrench him sideways. Remote hands and paper blades combine to lift the enormous body off balance, hurling it again and again across the club in a chain of overlapping afterimages, until the wolf crashes through a wall and immediately charges back through the dust. At last, the watching vampires unite and blast Qin through an open window, then sincerely thank Wu for saving them, explaining that a werewolf bite disables healing and effectively takes away half their remaining lives. Wu raises his cup and suggests that he could preserve the half they still possess, leaving one confused patron to ask what he means as he leisurely finishes the blood. Then he exposes poisoned wounds on his arm and reveals that a werewolf attacked him too. The crowd insists that once such wounds fester, the lost healing can never return, but Wu keeps folding the newspaper and asks whether they know of one exceptional remedy: the Feng family's silver blood, named as he displays the hunter's portrait. A vampire confirms that drinking it restores regeneration after wolf venom and questions Wu's interest. So, he says Feng once gave him that blood and cured him personally, leading the poisoned patrons to conclude they must kill the hunter and drink from him. Someone doubts that their weakened group could defeat Feng Ruyo, but Wu pours another drink and promises victory if they fight together under his lead, then raises the glass and asks who will risk half a life for the rest. Desperate vampires lift their own cups and chant for Feng's death and silver blood, while the mascot praises the lucky werewolf attack that established Wu's authority, only for him to ask, holding the folded newspaper, who said luck had anything to do with it. The absence of bloodstains from the fight draws the guide's attention to the paper, and it realizes that Wu manufactured the attacking werewolf as a doll to frighten the club into helping, before he schedules their operation for the following night. The mascot objects that the enemy will expect darkness, yet vampires cannot attack by day either, an excellent point, Wu unexpectedly says, because the solution is already prepared, despite the guide shouting that sunlight will burn every recruit. Wu opens Feng's newspaper and says an outside force will provide their cover, pointing to the announced total solar eclipse that will darken the daytime assault, and the next day finds Qin guarding the ancestral hall beneath a bright sun. The moon begins to cross its face and steadily dims the sky, until Qin announces that the predicted moment has arrived, just as a fiery achiever's hand appears behind him and taps one shoulder. He turns to watch it dissolve into sparks, then a second, enormous fist strikes his back and sends the unprepared werewolf flying. while Wu and his vampire force announce their arrival below. Wu checks his watch and gives them only 300 seconds of totality, after which the vampires quickly subdue Cheon but are ordered to bring him with them, all marveling at how smoothly the timed operation has begun. When someone asks where the captive went, an invisible blow hits a vampire in the face, and a concealed werewolf rushes through the formation to punch another backward. Rapid unseen attacks soon scatter the entire assault team. The mascot realizes Yu Lian placed invisibility on Cheon before assigning him to guard, so Wu closes his eyes and invokes a perception skill called Eye of the Oracle, reopening them in a glow as he scans for the hidden beast. Using its battlefield sense, the guide concludes that Cheon must be hovering directly overhead, only for the werewolf to reveal himself below by grabbing Wu's ankle, while elsewhere, the strain of maintaining invisibility exhausts Yu Lian despite Zhang's warning. Cheon later approaches her pavilion and respectfully addresses the witch as master, leading Wu and several vampires forward under the claim that he surrendered willingly, and she praises the cunning choice to exploit the conveniently timed eclipse. As owner of a press agency, Yu Lian says the daily newspaper made his plan obvious, leaving Wu to rub his forehead and call her far too intelligent for anyone's comfort, while Cheon asks whether he should execute the prisoner at once. The witch refuses because Feng has agreed to wait until Zhang's mind awakens inside him again, but without warning, Cheon raises his claws and roars at his master, giving Wu and the vampires the opening to rush past him toward the pavilion. They surround the weakened Feng between the columns and close every route of escape, only to collapse together into a tangled heap amid spreading dust, while Cheon catches Yu Lian by the throat and hisses into her face. She demands to know how he broke the controlling spell, and Wu calmly says he never removed her hypnosis at all, which makes his current obedience even more baffling to the trapped witch. The answer is that Wu copied her power and layered his own command over hers, as the surviving vampires surround Feng and fire a simultaneous energy blast. Yet the Silver Hunter rises through the smoke with his sword still ready. One broad counterattack cuts through the remaining assailants, and the next swing drives Cheon's werewolf body away from Yu Lian, before Feng pivots and launches himself at Wu with the blade overhead. The wounded hunter closes the gap and extends the sword toward his target, but Wu catches it on a paper blade while hidden flames approach from behind, then reveals that Feng engaged only a decoy surrounded by Achiever's hands. The blazing limbs strike together from several directions and pierce torso and limbs, though Yu Lian warns that killing Feng will also destroy Jiang, a threat Wu ignores as he orders Cheon to execute their prepared final step. The witch asks whether Jiang Pinger's life truly means nothing to him, but Cheon's technique is already drawing the girl's glowing spirit from Feng's fallen body, and gives her an independent form as it flies toward the exhausted werewolf. Cheon steadies his aching head after the resurrection, and the teammates briefly celebrate separating Zhang without sacrificing her consciousness, before he urgently warns that the temporary eclipse is about to end. Wu refuses to leave because the true objective can still be completed, sending a blazing hand downward with the declaration that Feng Ruoyu must die, and engulfing the target in an explosive wave of fire. Totality ends, sunlight returns, and every surviving vampire begins to burn inside the pavilion, although Wu's watch says 60 seconds should remain, leaving him unable to understand why the sky brightened so early. Yu Lian smiles and asks whether he finally recognizes the deception, then reveals that her press agency fabricated the eclipse report specifically to lure him, while the burning Wu asks how she created such convincing darkness. Her final supreme spell, Magic Night, temporarily turns broad daylight into night, and casting it at noon produced false totality until she chose to cancel the effect, restoring the sunlight that now consumes Wu's vampire host exactly as planned. His mascot begs Cheon to find some way of saving the burning teammate, and the werewolf tells Wu to endure while preparing a coroner skill. Bury into ground coats the vampire in thick earth and smothers the flames. Inside that shell, the scorched body is momentarily stabilized, earning enthusiastic praise from a watching mascot for Cheon's quick rescue, though mounting pressure soon begins to fracture the hardened soil. Wu explodes from it still wrapped in fire, so Cheon uses his immense strength to launch the vampire toward escape, promising to cover him as the burning body hurtles down the roof. Yu Lian mockingly admires such willingness to sacrifice oneself, then blows her warmest kiss and releases a pair of enchanted scarlet lips, which overtake Wu in midair and strike the already burning body from behind. The lips of flame touch his cheek and spread supernatural fire over every blackening limb, making the system guide mourn an excellent host it assumes has died, as only a small scorched remnant falls back onto the pavilion roof. Cheon collapses over the remains, trembling and calling his teammate's name through tears, while Yu Lian mockingly regrets that he was denied the final blow, then celebrates a death that prevents anyone else from stealing her precious toys. The devastated werewolf accuses her of murdering Wu and throws himself forward with a roar of revenge, but she dismisses him as a rebellious possession in need of punishment. Worker bees swarm around an orange magical whip in her hand, whose first effortless sweep cuts across Cheon's leap and curls around his body before he can reach her. Its enchanted length coils through the air as the insects circle, controlled from the witch's waist while she smiles at the tightening restraint, until several orange bands have bound the werewolf's torso and limbs completely. Yu Lian slams him onto the roof and pulls every loop tighter, leaving Cheon to strain helplessly against the thick bindings, while she crouches over the growling captive. Calling him her favorite toy, the witch promises that he will never escape again, but her smug expression vanishes at something approaching too quickly to stop, and suddenly Chin breaks free, seizes her, and makes blood spill from a new chest wound. A blazing achiever's hand has burst through Yu Lian's torso, leaving her unable to understand how Chin can use the dead Wu's signature power. Until the werewolf reveals that Wu controls this body and declares himself Mr. Wu. Chin transferred his teammate's soul into the werewolf host moments before the vampire burned away, and the dying witch warns that her death will trap Wu inside this place forever. A threat he dismisses because the injured Feng still needs time to recover even with silver blood. Yu Lian answers with a sinister smile because another contingency is already active, and a warning shows Feng's cutification at 99%, revealing the final trap as his transformation threatens everyone nearby. Scales and black claws spread over the hunter's trembling hand, and Wu realizes the worker bees had already filled Feng with enough killing intent. A last gift, Yu Lian calls it as she collapses from the wound. Her eyes close and the remaining strength leaves her body, while mutated Feng throws back his head in a monstrous roar, reaching full cutification as an armored creature armed with 2 blades. The new Cud charges with a declaration that everyone around him must die, leaps at Wu's shared body with both curved swords raised, and unleashes a crossing cut that must be defended at close range. Wu sweeps the weapons aside with a blazing achiever's hand, then batters Feng's face and torso with 2 remote fists that barely move him, proof of the transformed body's extraordinary new power. Feng traps one burning hand against his scaled chest and prepares to answer, spinning the short swords while asking how Wu will fight after losing both hands, then slashes through the spectral limbs and Qin's physical forearms together. Both souls scream as the shared werewolf body loses its arms, but Qin takes control and insists that his powerful legs are still intact, curling into an acrobatic charge with a mocking plea for mercy. Feng stares at the strange unarmed approach in confusion, while Qin springs upward on bleeding stumps and positions both feet, then snaps a heavy kick into the Cud's head. One dexterous foot clamps around Feng's scaled wrist in an attempt to control the blade, but he stops the leg-based counter with ease and calls it pointless, before hurling Qin across the roof into several unconscious bodies. After that failure, Wu asks to retake their mutilated shared form, and red energy coils around the severed limbs as another transformation begins. New fangs breaking from the skull while borrowed blood reshapes the host. Both arms return as the body rebuilds itself with stronger bloodwolf traits, earning Qin's praise for Wu's successful transformation, and fully restored, he advances with a promise that Feng will lose this time. Feng points out that the bloodwolf is also half vampire and therefore vulnerable to daylight, which immediately burns fur and flesh from the shared body, making Qin panic within their mind and demand that Wu undo the transformation. Wu refuses because this very weakness is essential to his counterattack, as a blazing projectile crashes into Feng's torso and drives the Cud backward through the sun, then launches him upward long enough for Wu to close in. He follows the explosion and grapples Feng before the armored body can recover, reshapes his jaw, and sinks bloodwolf fangs deep into the exposed neck, holding on even when an armored forearm smashes into his head. The bite pierces fully and infects Feng with vampirism, while a remote hand forces stored blood into the Cud's open mouth, making him swallow beneath the direct sunlight as Wu holds his jaws apart. Reflected light fills Feng's widening eye when the consequence becomes clear, for both bodies begin to burn. But his newly pure vampire form crumbles much faster, and Wu traps him in a crushing embrace so there can be no escape into shade. Feng asks whether his opponent plans to perish beside him, but Wu explains that a half-vampire can endure broad daylight longer than a pure one, and soon the hunter's hands and body break completely into ash. Wu remains upright in the ruined bloodwolf host, clutching the last crumbling remnants, while both mascots celebrate and praise Qin for providing such a compatible body. Then mission extraction begins, lifting them from the destroyed pavilion. Qin thanks Wu for saving everyone and admits that he owes one favor, so Wu shakes his hand and advises him not to fall under enemy hypnosis quite so readily next time. An exchange the guides find awkward because both men still occupy one naked body. Before extraction completes, Yu Lian unexpectedly rises alive behind them, and Wu demands how she survived a flaming hand through the heart. She had prepared silver blood in advance, healed enough to live, and merely pretended to die. Her own extraction starts as Yu politely tells Wu to take care of himself, then pauses with the suggestion that she knows something he desperately needs. Without her, he may never learn who originally murdered him. Shocked that Yu Lian knows the truth of his death, Wu lunges for her beam, but she blows a playful farewell kiss while dissolving beyond his reach, and both missions extract their hosts before he can demand an answer. Wu vows to uncover the identity of his killer at their next encounter, then returns to killing intent space beneath the giant evaluation brush, which touches his forehead and calculates the mission beside the waiting Jiang. His reward is rank B, 3 talent points and 50% title experience, though host potential remains at C even after a 4th completed assignment, and the mascot says the experience is still insufficient for another title. Wu remembers receiving one before his second mission had fully ended and questions the contradiction, so the guide offers an immediate advancement with the warning that it would produce only half a title, prompting Zhang to ask what such an incomplete reward would mean. Half titles can malfunction unpredictably or inflict unknown side effects, risks Wu accepts without hesitation because he believes he can handle the consequences, though the mascot says there is a second strategic danger. Mission strength follows title level, so an incomplete host will be sent into stronger worlds while underpowered, an additional disadvantage that makes Wu smile with greater interest interest, and Jiang promises to remain with him whichever choice he makes. The mascot guesses that Yu Lian's secret has made him impatient for power, but Wu cuts off the teasing and demands the promised advancement, ordering it to upgrade the title immediately as Jiang follows anxiously. His fifth mission begins in a uniformed young man seated inside a sunny office, documents scattered across the desk and a missing cat notice among them, while noon arrives and Wu's consciousness settles into the ticking of a wall clock. He senses a strange disturbance through the open window, stretches in the chair above the prominently fallen notice, and receives a 1-against-2 mission to kill Xia Tianhua within 300 hours. The mascot recalls how narrowly Wu survived even with an ally, warning that his new title has raised the difficulty and may make this target almost impossible to locate, only for him to announce that he has already found the woman. When the astonished guide asks how he identified Xia seconds after arrival, Wu throws the missing cat notice over its face instead of answering, because the poster plainly gives owner Xia Tianhua's name and room number. The mascot reads the clue in embarrassed silence, then warns that a target inviting discovery so openly may be even stronger than Feng, which makes Wu suggest a direct visit to find out. The notice leads to condominium room 503, where Hopping's worried owner awaits news, and Wu approaches the numbered apartment carrying a large box, disguised as building security when he rings the bell. A blonde woman wrapped in a bath towel opens the door cautiously, while Wu presents the box, calls himself security, and shows the folded notice, which she immediately recognizes as her own missing cat poster. Xia eagerly asks whether he found Huaping, and Wu invites her to open the box and see for herself, so she peers inside hopefully and softly calls her pet's name. Her eyes widen when the hidden contents reveal a trap, as a blazing achiever's hand erupts from the box and punches through her torso, then retracts while Wu watches the grievous wound without emotion. A merciless kick knocks Xia to the floor against the doorway, where she reaches out through the blood and desperately asks for mercy, only to hear that an assassin does not spare his target. Recognizing what Wu is, Xia recalls a mysterious event 6 months earlier, then clarifies that the plea was never for her own life. She only needs to know whether Huaping was truly found before she dies. The mascot marvels that the cat remains her sole concern at the brink of death, while Wu senses something wrong and decides the safest response is to finish quickly, despite how unusually effortless the apparent mission has been. That ease itself is the strongest reason for suspicion, Wu says, and after reconsidering the scene, the guide identifies 3 contradictions. First, Xia seems entirely ordinary for the target of such a difficult assignment. Second, neither of the 2 preventers has appeared to defend her. And third, her death did not extract Wu back into killing intent space, clues that expose the hidden condition of the mission. He concludes that Xia possesses the power to resurrect, and at that moment her eyes open as the fatal injuries restore themselves, letting her rise fully healed after lying dead at his feet. Wu calls her remarkable while she stares up in silent confusion, and crouches close enough to study her while blocking escape, though Xia insists that she is an ordinary person unaware of anything strange. Nobody who refuses to stay dead can call herself ordinary, Wu replies, and Xia studies him before asking whether he comes from another world, an insight that makes him demand what exposed his foreign origin. Everyone local knows the global phenomenon called the Grim Reaper is dead, she explains, but Wu has never heard the phrase and repeats it in disbelief, prompting her to tell what happened to her terminal cancer 6 months before. Unable to endure the pain, Xia climbed to a rooftop to end her life, stepped from the ledge, and chose a fatal fall over the disease, only for an unprecedented event to occur at the instant her body broke below. The Grim Reaper is dead restored her instead of allowing death, and Xia rose before astonished witnesses with even the terminal illness unable to kill her. A resurrection that was not hers alone but happened to people everywhere. Corpses awakened in morgues and patients returned in hospitals, making the entire human population effectively immortal from that day onward. And outside the condominium, the mascot asks whether Wu truly means to let his target go. He cannot kill an immortal woman, Wu replies as he exits the gate, and first intends to verify the extraordinary story, when a red motorcycle carrying 2 thieves speeds past the complex. They have stolen a pedestrian's bag and taunt its desperate owner while fleeing, promising to return it only if she can somehow catch them, until a blazing achiever's hand appears directly in front of the driver's face. The startled pair swerve violently beside the wall, crash into it, and fly onto the pavement in what appears to be instant death, while Wu dryly blames the driver for failing to follow his signal straight ahead. Dressed as security, he claims the thief mistook his gesture for a police direction, then confirms that both robbers are dead and waits for the result of his test. As the breathless victim retrieves her brown handbag from the wreckage, she lifts it by the chain and begins to leave, but behind her both thieves resurrect already tied together inside a tire, and the revived woman asks for help against the madman who restrained them. Instead, the victim beats her with the recovered handbag and warns her never to steal it again, confirming to Wu that Xia told the truth as the immortal pair flee, though he suddenly stops upon sensing another presence nearby. Telling the mascot that they have company, Wu lets a fiery hand flicker beside the bushes, while the anxious guide wonders whether the 2 preventers have finally arrived. But he says the concealed observer is something else. Achiever's hand plunges into the rustling growth and drags it out, revealing not a spy but a scruffy brown cat dangling harmlessly from his grip, and an animal that looks strangely familiar as Wu studies it. The mascot recognizes Xia's missing pet from the poster, and Wu kneels to call Huaping while reaching out cautiously, only for the ragged, visibly injured cat to nuzzle his finger and purr. Smiling, Wu announces that they have found the missing animal, though the guide reminds him that the mission concerns the Grim Reaper, not pet rescue, which leads him to ask Huaping whether a literal death exists in this world. To their astonishment, the cat answers aloud that such a being certainly does, making the mascot scream while Wu examines it in silence, until instinct tells him that Zhang Pinger inhabits the animal. Zhang confirms herself and wonders how he recognized her in a cat, but Wu simply calls it instinct as she settles on his shoulder, then tells the mascot that Huoping's veterinarian has met the Grim Reaper. On the way to the clinic, Wu asks why she believes the veterinarian is Death himself, and Zhang promises that his treatment of wounded animals will expose the truth. Before their search ends at Qin Yixian Veterinary Clinic in the afternoon sun, Wu rushes inside and begs the staff to save Huoping, handing the injured cat to a green-haired veterinarian watched by a pink-haired nurse, and the doctor recognizes the pet while examining the bloody wound across its chest. He demands how Wu found Xia's missing cat and what injured it, receiving the claim that Huaping was already hurt beside the road, then carries the animal toward treatment with his assistant and a suspicious Wu following. The nurse blocks the outsider because his presence could interrupt the procedure, so Wu pretends to comply and promises to wait outside. While deeper in the clinic, a fluffy gray cat approaches an offered dish. The pink-haired assistant watches it eat as Wu remains in the lobby, where the mascot complains that Zhang deliberately injured Huaping for a demonstration they cannot even observe. But Wu raises a finger and says he can still watch remotely. Endless knowledge links him to a security camera that has recorded 103 animal treatment, and copied surveillance makes his eyes glow as the footage appears, showing the veterinarian lay whooping on the treatment table. He strokes the cat, apologizes gently, and promises a quick end, then suddenly cuts its throat before Wu's horrified eyes, making him leap up and shout Zhang's name across the lobby. He charges past the startled nurse into the room, where the veterinarian protests that treatment is unfinished beside Huoping's bloody body, and Wu seizes a scalpel while accusing the man of murdering his cat. Blinded by rage, he lunges with a promise of repayment, whipping the blade toward a doctor who begs desperately not to be killed, because unlike everyone else here, the veterinarian says he is not immortal. The mascot urges Wu to calm down and look at the table, where Huaping awakens without a mark and proves Young's consciousness survived. Then Wu holds the scalpel to the doctor and demands an explanation. Cornered, the man confesses that he is the Grim Reaper, whose power heals only dead animals and therefore required killing Huaping first. Though Wu questions how death can be mortal in a world of immortal humans, the doctor exchanged his fate with humanity and gave them his own immortality, all to save Xia Tianhua, he admits, remembering her fearful call before surgery 6 months earlier when she asked him to take care of Huaping. He reached the hospital too late and saw the terminally ill woman leap, witnessing her bloodied body below the building, then desperately traded his fate for humanity's to restore her. The bargain made the Reaper mortal while granting Xia and every human eternal life, and Wu asks why he did not revert it once her operation was over. Because the remaining cancer would kill her the moment immortality disappeared, the man explains. Wu smiles dangerously and asks what the Reaper's own death would do, learning that it would instantly cancel the exchange and make the attack suicidal for him too. But he answers that assassins accept death and flicks the surgical knife forward. Under the current rules, Wu declares, nobody can die as he strikes down, yet the blade glances across the doctor's chest after hitting something concealed, leaving the astonished veterinarian alive and Wu aware of an unexpected defense. He asks what in the coat stopped a razor-sharp scalpel, and the doctor reaches for an object recently given by his nurse, a folded paper crane that immediately reminds Wu of an earlier enemy. Recognizing the sorcery, he turns and announces an unexpected reunion, identifying the pink-haired nurse as Fei Ron from the third mission, now serving as a preventer because keeping the Grim Reaper alive preserves Xia's immortality. Fei orders the doctor to flee and unfolds her book into a swarm of edged cranes, while he grabs Huaping and runs, leaving her to confront Wu, who flicks aside one attacker and reaches after the escaping man. Paper wings close from every direction to shield the retreat, suppressing Wu as the Reaper carries Huaping from the table, but he teleports a burning hand with the scalpel directly toward them. The blade races at Huaping when the veterinarian suddenly uses the cat as a shield, forcing Wu to halt at inches from the animal's face, even as additional fiery hands catch incoming cranes without breaking his concentration. The remote limbs destroy Fei's projectiles while Huoping remains captive, and Wu condemns the supposed animal healer for hiding behind a pet, though the Reaper argues that Huoping cannot die permanently while death obeys him. Fei charges through the blazing hands and sweeps a kick at Wu, who pivots away while recalling the teleported limbs, then reattaches both to his wrists and restores his ordinary arms. Crossing them, Wu invokes a mysterious command called Arm of the Oracle Switch, but the ability malfunctions and makes his own hand slap both cheeks, prompting Fei to suggest the name slapping one's own face instead. Wu demands to know why Arm of the Oracle escaped his control, and her smirk precedes an explanation of how the new ability was hijacked. The apparent arm is Fei's paper shell, which now crumbles around him. The Grim Reaper warns Wu as her confidence opens a path for a concealed attack, and Faye sees a blazing fist reflected in her eye one instant too late, before his hidden real arm punches through her upper chest and sends her sprawling. It retracts through Wu's paper disguise while the wounded preventer collapses, and she asks how he seemed to attack with 3 arms. Because the visible right limb was a paper fake created solely for deception. Wu's genuine arm had teleported away and circled behind Faye in secret, leaving her wounded among the folded cranes while Huaping remains unharmed. Then the cat cries out a warning about another weapon approaching from the rear. Wu turns to see a crane diving at the back of his neck, and ducks just beneath its slicing pass, while Faye covertly moves one finger to redirect the missed projectile. Instead of returning to Wu, the crane cuts through its own creator's throat, a backfire that makes the mascot laugh with delight, though Wu says Faye deliberately intended the weapon to kill her. The mascot explains that suicide is the fastest way for Faye to repair a pierced body, since temporary death in this immortal world erases even catastrophic wounds at once, and moments later her eyes reopen as resurrection finishes. Fully restored, Faye snatches an empty anesthesia bottle from the floor, reshapes the container into another long surgical blade, and grips it confidently as she resumes the fight. Pointing the new weapon at Wu, she says the previous mistake will not happen twice, but he calmly asks why the anesthesia bottle was empty, making Faye realize too late that the blade itself has exposed her to the drug. Wu had coated every available surgical knife with the missing anesthetic, and as Faye collapses under its effect, she insists that he will lose anyway, finishing that ominous warning just before consciousness leaves her. The puzzled mascot asks what possible defeat she could still mean, while Wu remembers her promise that we must keep the Grim Reaper safe and notices the plural, proof that Faye is cooperating with another hidden preventer. The 1-against-2 assignment confirms that a second enemy must already be close, so Wu lunges for the Reaper in hopes of finishing before the intervention, only for his vision to glitch and distort the veterinarian's apparent position. He continues thrusting while unaware that sight and body are misaligned, which makes the mascot laugh because the knife seems to be stabbing empty air, until Wu pulls it back and a spray of blood erupts from nothing. The strike found an invisible opponent, he calmly realizes, as a transparent human form collapses heavily into the spreading blood. An invisibility magic identifies the recurring second preventer as Yu Lian. Clinic tools begin floating all around Wu, revealing more concealed attackers, so he activates enhanced sight to penetrate the spell, and sees a crowd of hidden figures, carrying assorted medical weapons. Their red eyes rush him from every direction while he tracks them calmly, allowing the Grim Reaper to seize Huaping and flee behind the distraction, as one invisible man swings a scalpel at Wu's neck. Wu bends backward and lets the blade whistle above his face, then clamps its owner's wrist in a fiery hand and turns the momentum downward, slamming the concealed assailant headfirst into the floor. Debris in another teleported hand smashes a second invisible face, while a third attacker catches Wu's flaming wrist and raises scissors, only to have those scissors stolen and buried in a nearby companion's neck. The Reaper reaches the corridor with Huaping as someone else slips behind Wu, breaking a medicine bottle over his head in a shower of glass. Then multiple invisible bodies grapple his arms and crowd him with weapons. Their target races farther down the corridor while the mob overwhelms Wu, though one burning hand still hovers above an attacker, and he decides to strike 2 enemies at once before continuing the pursuit. A red-eyed man boasts that immortal victims will only resurrect no matter how often Wu kills them, but Wu says death is unnecessary now that he understands their control. Then a remote hand plucks a tiny bee stinger from the man's neck. Removing the object restores free will automatically, leaving the liberated victim clutching his skin and wondering why he is naked inside a clinic, while the mascot delights in a way to release every servant. Another controlled assailant immediately attacks the confused man, forcing Wu to deflect a sharp projectile with his blazing hand, and send it harmlessly past the freed victim's throat. The red-eyed attacker keeps advancing despite the first rescue, and the mascot warns that the whole crowd cannot recover until they locate Yu Lian herself. While Wu catches a spinning surgical blade between fiery fingers, he redirects it at a fluffy gray clinic cat, which springs aside just before the point reaches its body, then flees into a corner with scissors in Wu's remote hand pursuing. The teleported weapon nearly catches the animal in midair, but one servant grabs it barehanded to shield the cat, an independent sacrifice no mindless victim would make for an ordinary animal. Wu openly identifies the gray cat as Yu Lian, and it answers in the witch's voice by asking what betrayed the disguise. The animal could clearly see a mascot invisible to ordinary residents. Besides, Wu adds, Zhang has already shown that a human can transmigrate into a cat, so the exposed queen bee orders every remaining servant to tear him apart, only for the red-eyed crowd to stand frozen and unresponsive. Yu demands to know what he has done, and Wu explains that her servants are controlled by the power of Queen Bee, a title his newly gained oracle has now sealed. The witch realizes that Wu's upgrade can temporarily disable other people's titles, before a gigantic flaming hand pins her feline body down, and he reminds her that cats never received humanity's immortality. Beneath the fire, Yu bargains that her death will bury the truth he needs, so Wu suspends her by the back and orders her to speak immediately. But the blazing hand unexpectedly disintegrates and drops the frightened cat. Yu lands safely as Wu stares at his suddenly empty grip while the confused mascot demands to know why he released her, and he admits that arm of the Oracle stopped responding without explanation. The dangerous side effect of an incomplete title has finally manifested, an hourglass showing Oracle temporarily sealing itself and disabling the arm, leaving Wu powerless before the advancing cat while Fei remains unconscious nearby. He reaches with an ordinary hand as Yu darts toward the fallen preventer, leaps onto Fei, and urgently commands her to provide protection, triggering a dormant paper defense around the anesthetized body. Wu lunges desperately before the cat can escape, but a razor-edged sheet cuts through his outstretched hand, followed by several folded blades that pierce both palms. He tears free and blasts the surrounding paper apart, the explosion opening the clinic wall in a cloud of smoke and rubble, then races through the breach after both preventers. The pursuit crosses a quiet residential neighborhood under the afternoon sky, until Wu returns to Xia Tianhua's condominium in room 503, where the mascot complains that they captured neither enemy nor the Grim Reaper. Zhao is missing too, making the entire fight seem pointless, but Wu reminds the guide that the fleeing veterinarian carried Jiang inside hooping and therefore gave them a trail. Elsewhere, ordinary traffic rolls through a busy city intersection. The signal changes green as leaves drift beside the road, and Zhao waves from the curb to someone approaching across the street, the Grim Reaper, carrying hooping and scolding her for leaving home while targeted. She eagerly takes the cat and says she could not wait any longer, but Huaping struggles in her arms and stares urgently toward the road, then scratches Xia's hand until the surprised owner loosens her hold. The cat jumps free and races away, heading directly across the street against a red signal, where a speeding truck bears down with its horn blaring. Xia runs after Huaping without hesitation, reaches the animal at the last instant, and takes the impact while shielding it, leaving her bleeding beside the truck with the cat safe against her chest. The shock driver calls her insane for sacrificing herself to an animal, but Xia calmly says she cannot die despite the pool of blood, and he complains that immortality will not repair his damaged vehicle. The Grim Reaper offers full payment and additional compensation, while the driver curses a world where people act like invulnerable heroes, though Xia insists she would have protected Huaping even without immortality. Cradling the cat, she explains that this pet is her only remaining family, leaving Zhang silent and visibly moved inside Huaping, as the wounded owner gently reassures the animal on her lap. Eventually, they return to the Grim Reaper's quiet home, where a visitor rings the doorbell without those inside knowing who waits, and he opens it to Fei Ran carrying Yu Lian's gray cat body. Fei says she has come to protect him from Wu, is invited inside, and immediately asks for the cat cage, where she places Yu Lian beside Huaping. Telling them to behave, Fei deliberately leaves the two human minds alone, while Yu praises Jiang for recognizing that the newcomer was no ordinary cat, then smugly confirms her humanity as she licks one paw. Feline instinct and the witch's advance make Jiang meow anxiously and retreat, which Yu mocks as proof that animal desire overwhelms even dignified human minds, before moving suggestively toward the female Huaping. Zhang raises her claws and furiously tells the other cat to stay away, a reaction Yu says has finally exposed the person inside, though Zhang demands how she could be recognized in an unfamiliar body. The queen bee recently asked Wu the same question and repeats his answer that transmigration into a cat is no longer surprising, then lunges as Jiang warns that she will never be used against teacher again. Yu admits that sealed queen bee prevents any direct command for now, but asks what Jiang intends to do when the defining power is unnecessary. Can she truly stand by and watch Wu kill Xia, the owner who loves Huaping? The memory of Xia taking the truck's impact makes Jiang hesitate, though she insists that compassion cannot be allowed to fail Wu's fifth mission. And Yu points out that he survives failure, whereas success makes Xia permanently mortal. Jiang lowers her head beneath the weight of that difference, whilst night falls and every guarded room in the Reaper's home suddenly goes dark, announcing Wu's arrival to Yulian as Jiang sits anxiously nearby. The witch wonders how he found a supposedly secret residence, and Jiang reveals the tracker hidden in Huaping's collar before the clinic battle, just as a crash turns Yu toward the cage door. She smashes the metal enclosure and frees both cats as the attack begins, then races through the dark house with an origami bat pursuing, while Fei and the Reaper look up at the chase overhead. Fei launches another bat toward the movement, but Yu intercepts the creature with a flying kick and sends it spinning through the darkness. It crashes into a wall and lodges in the damaged surface, as Yu boasts that a feline body gives her superior night vision, so Fei sets a folded creature alight in her palm. Numerous flaming paper animals fill the room with light and surround the cat, after which Fei checks the Grim Reaper and is relieved to find him unharmed, though his troubled expression reveals another crisis. Xia Tianhua has disappeared, and 6 hours later the illuminated residence still has no trace of her, leaving the Grim Reaper and both preventers to wait together in anxiety. He asks whether they located Wu, convinced the assassin abducted Xia, but Fei has no information on his movements, and the Reaper turns guiltily to Xia's latest phone message. It shows her holding Huaping and claiming that every danger around him is her fault, while Faye rests a reassuring hand on his shoulder and reminds him that immortality still prevents anyone from killing Xia permanently. Yu adds that the woman remains safe while the mortal Reaper is protected until his ringing phone interrupts the uneasy reassurance, and both he and Faye lean toward the screen. An attached video may reveal Xia's location, but instead shows her trapped underwater and struggling weakly, enclosed in a transparent container with no way to reach air. Her terrified eyes open as water fills her lungs, and she thrashes against the walls with both hands, repeatedly drowning, reviving, and vomiting water only to drown again. The horrified Reaper screams Xia's name while clutching the phone, then receives a request for a video call from the unseen captor, which he accepts in fury and desperation. The connection reveals a speedboat crossing open water under a bright sky, where a blonde young man greets him and confirms that the drowning video was watched, while the Reaper demands to know why an innocent woman is being tortured. The captor wants mortality restored to the world in exchange for ending Xia's suffering, a demand the Reaper hears as an order to kill the woman he loves. But true love, the caller argues, means releasing her from immortality's endless agony. As Xia continues to drown, he urges reversal of the exchange, and the Reaper quietly agrees because he cannot endure watching any longer, then throws down the phone and announces his decision despite Faye's alarm. She tackles him onto the sofa before he can act, calling it madness to obey Wu and sacrifice himself to make the world mortal. But the Reaper catches her throat in a glowing hand. Orange energy surrounds him as he declares that nothing will stop Xia's rescue, while Faye secretly summons a tiny paper crane near her neck and uses it to cut him until the grip releases. A luminous wound opens along the mortal man's throat, leaving him unconscious or dead beneath the solemn eyes of both preventers, who expect punishment now that they have failed to preserve the exchange. Faye checks the recording time while Xia remains visible before the drowning, but 5 minutes later they are still not extracted even though a mortal target should be dead, making her wonder whether the Reaper exchanged fates a second time. He explains that the ability can be used only once in 100 years, leaving Faye unable to explain why the world remains unchanged, until Yu suspects that her earlier conversation with Zhang altered the outcome. Morning light reaches the house while the preventers continue analyzing, and aboard the speedboat, Wu's mascot asks why completion has not returned him to killing intent space. So he turns to Huiping and asks whether Zhang interfered to save Xia. Zhang apologizes and admits acting without permission, making Wu sit upright as he realizes the target survived the end of immortality, because Xia once saved Zhang inside Huiping and repeated drownings were unbearable to watch. Before the ordeal, she secretly placed a knife inside the water-filled wooden coffin which Xia used to escape after the protection ended, and now Jiang crouches guiltily on deck as Wu approaches. The mascot warns that mercy toward enemies only destroys one's own side, while Wu studies his remorseful student and chooses a direct test. Would she save Xia again if he renewed the attempt to kill her? Jiang says the debt is fully paid and she owes the woman nothing more, an answer Wu accepts as he lifts Huaping into his arms, then says they must find Xia before either preventer does. The speedboat continues over the open sea as the search begins, but Wu soon discovers that Zhang has vanished from beside him, because feline instinct made her chase a moving red laser dot across the deck. Huaping pounces and traps the glow beneath one paw, then notices that the dot remains on the boat and realizes it was deliberate bait. Just before Xia catches the cat from behind with the laser pointer in hand. Cuddling Huaping, she announces that Mommy has come to save her beloved pet, while Zhang warns aloud that Xia is mortal again, and explains the human consciousness inside, making the owner worry about the real cat. Huaping will return after the mission, Zhang promises, but when Xia asks what that mission is, Wu appears with a knife as the answer is revealed, and lunges before the shocked Zhang can stop him. The revived Grim Reaper drops from above and drives Wu violently into the deck, pinning the assassin with red glowing eyes before he can strike Xia, as Faye arrives on a giant paper crane carrying Yu Lian. Holding Wu from behind, the Reaper boasts that he has become immortal, while the mascot urges use of Arm of the Oracle before Xia escapes, only for another hourglass malfunction to disable the half-title again. Zhang rushes toward her teacher and tells him to endure, but Yu Lian intercepts Huaping with a hard blow across the face, sending the cat tumbling over the deck and preventing the rescue. Faye sends several cranes at the recovering Zhang as Xia races toward Huaping, and Xia shields the cat with her own body, taking paper blades through arm and shoulder, then curls around Zhang while the preventer continues the relentless barrage. Another crane stops dangerously close to the animal in Xia's grip, as a long paper ribbon sweeps over the deck beneath Yu Lian's gaze, and Faye demands why the witch has turned her weapons against their creator. She struggles to command the surrounding cranes and admits that all control is gone, while rogue blades cut her repeatedly and spray blood across the deck, until Faye collapses beside the restrained Grim Reaper without understanding the failure. An hourglass forming around her title points the accusation toward Wu, who confirms that Oracle sealed her practitioner skill and left its paper creations uncontrolled, then approaches wounded Xia and declares that the 5th mission must end. Zhang remembers the woman promising to protect Huiping even without an immortal life, and breaks her earlier resolve by begging teacher for mercy despite the disloyal request. But Wu silently sweeps his blade across Xia and ignores the plea. Zhang covers her face in grief as the bleeding body lies still, while the helpless Reaper calls Xia's name after failing to prevent the fatal strike, and a defeated preventer bitterly concedes another loss to Wu. Xia remains motionless with closed eyes until her heart suddenly beats and she awakens despite humanity's restored mortality, sitting upright in disbelief at having survived the dramatic slash. Wu displays a clean blade and calls the outcome fate, revealing that he chose to spare her, and a relieved Xia embraces Huaping while thanking him sincerely, before he turns to Yu Lian and proposes a bargain. Sparing the target does not free the witch from consequences for repeatedly opposing him, but Wu claims her original murderer can be found inside punishment space if she enters for his team, a promise Yu Lian doubts and asks him to justify. That realm repeats a person's first death until the true cause is uncovered, he explains, though she still demands proof that this extraordinary claim can be trusted, so Wu tells her to question his mascot directly. The system confirms that he is telling the truth, making Wu angrily ask why it concealed this information from him before, and the mascot warns that endless repetitions of an unsolved death are no vacation. Yu asks what would let her enter punishment space in their place, then reveals a punishment decree obtained through difficult trading in killing intent space, already marked with the 2 mission failures accumulated by her and Faye. Crushing it counts a surrender and supplies the 3rd failure required for entry, allowing Wu to hold the decree and announce that Xia no longer needs to die, while the immortal Grim Reaper recovers amid falling strips of paper. He rushes into Xia's arms and shouts her name as Zhang watches the reunion, though she tearfully regrets that terminal cancer will leave them little time together, until Wu approaches with the decree and casually flicks another sealing effect toward her. The Reaper shields Xia and demands to know what has been done, so Wu reveals that Oracle can seal harmful conditions as well as titles, and an hourglass-labeled tumor appears over the cancer cells. Both lovers bow deeply in gratitude while Wu holds Zhang inside Huaping, but he warns that the seal can last no more than 10 years. A temporary reprieve Xia gratefully accepts for another decade beside the man she loves. From his shoulder, Zhang promises affectionately to follow Wu everywhere, and he crushes the red decree before inviting her into punishment space, where he awakens inside a memory of the violent night that ended his original life. The mascot says the death will repeat until Wu uncovers its truth, and within the recreated scene, he rapidly eliminates the gunman around the glass enclosure, then moves through the burning high-rise exactly as he once did. With the target neutralized, Wu reaches the steel wire used for escape, when a mysterious voice calls his name at the crucial instant, and the shock makes him lose his footing over the illuminated city. Before death, he glimpses a distant silhouette standing on the same wire, a figure previously hidden in the darkness of the fall. But this time Wu is determined to change history and expose the killer. Blazing hands propel him upward instead of letting him drop, and he lands beside a silver-haired woman he recognizes as Jing Meng, then demands why she murdered him, to her genuine shock. Jing insists that she came to save Wu rather than cause the fall, and asks whether he knows why criminals call her the Underworld Queen. She resembles a legendary ruler of death because she can see everyone's final moments. Jing says she would never have rescued him if suspicion were the reward, then claims that this was only one of many times she protected him, having foreseen assassins killing Wu during vulnerable moments throughout his life. She eliminated those killers first and kept him alive until the night of the high-rise, which makes Wu ask whether a vision of his death brought her there, and demand the identity of the murderer she foresaw. After an awkward pause, Jing says the predicted killer was herself, though she insists that the prophecy is more complicated than the accusation suggests, so Wu activates Paradigm Arc, the second disciple's skill, to inspect her vision. The technique projects a scene of Jing standing beside him before his death, and Wu compares that silent figure with the woman now on the wire, scrutinizing tiny differences that make her visibly uncertain. Her present skirt does not match the one shown in the prophecy, because Jing deliberately changed clothes in hopes of preventing the future, and Wu suspects an even more important detail was missed when the original fall began. Zhang asks whether he has discovered the answer, but Wu promises an explanation only after testing the theory in another repetition, his focused stare showing that the fatal memory contains an inconsistency. The cycle starts before the armed guards surrounding his assassination target, and Wu completes the killing before striding toward the wire through the flames, where Jing's dark silhouette appears once more. Another approaching figure resembles Zhang as Jing calls Wu's name exactly as remembered, recreating the shock that broke his balance, and he falls again while both women remain above. During the descent, Wu confirms that the person beside him in Jing's vision was not Jing, but another woman whose appearance was almost identical to the Underworld Queen, and awakens from the repeated death certain of that hidden identity. Punishment space resets once more after the bloody assassination, where Wu asks Zhang whether she knows whom he saw on the wire, and her mascot form presses eagerly for the answer. The culprit was someone he could never have imagined finding there, Wu says before finally revealing the person from the recreated vision, Zhang Pinger herself, whose human form appears behind the mascot in memory. She materialized from nowhere on the wire just before Wu lost his footing, then vanished as abruptly while Jing watched him fall, though the present Zhang cannot understand why her counterpart would want him dead. Wu clarifies that she served only as bait and the real killer transported her there, leaving Zhang to demand the identity of the hidden mastermind, and he reaches toward the stunned mascot standing before him. Wu's finger settles on the mascot as he names the killing intent system as the architect of his murder, while the indignant guide asks what motive it could possibly have. His exceptional talent, Wu suggests, which the system coveted for a new host. Only death could deliver him into killing intense space and make recruitment possible. And the mascot admits responsibility but asks why Xing's foresight never exposed it, because her repeated visions let her prevent every earlier attempt on Wu's life. To deceive Xing, the system found Zhang in another world because the two women looked identical, and materialized her on the wire at the instant of Wu's death, creating a false prophecy in which the underworld queen seemed responsible. Xing therefore overlooked the real cause, while Wu unknowingly drank from his glass, whose wine the system had poisoned so the eventual fall would be fatal. And once exposed completely, the mascot breaks into a satisfied, mischievous laugh. It praises Wu as the perfect host and declares the punishment space mission complete, though he still demands the deeper reason for murdering the talent it supposedly valued, a truth the mascot postpones until his title reaches maximum, claiming that the death protected him.